I can't hear you, Sluggy. We can't hear you, Sluggy. Yeah, we can hear you now.
Yes.
Good. We good to go. Management, we good to go.
Yes, we are. We are live. Let's go.
Okay, mute all mics, please. Mute all mics. Good night, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Homegrown Roundtable. First, I want to say thanks to the panelists for coming on. Mr. Eiffel, thank you a million. Mr. Brown, thank you a million. Ms. Cadogan, Nikita Vaughn, thank you so much. Sandy Marshall, thank you so much. Of course, Randy, thanks for coming later. It comes with the job, so don't have to thank Randy. um, Tonight we're going to have a wonderful discussion. We're looking at moving the arts and the culture forward. We're looking at the business of entertainment as well. We're looking at exporting culture and our culture. We're looking at things like what Mr. Day Brown said, like why only certain people are seen as artists. So we can answer all of those questions tonight. We're gonna seek answers tonight, and those of you listening on 94.7, as we go along, Mr. Eastman would be moderating. I will introduce topics and questions. The panelists are all free to speak and all free to ask questions, and the panelists are all free to get their points and their message across. This is the forum where we welcome everyone's ideas, and I'm sure it's going to be a loving show. Thanks, Trader 10 TV. We must mention this, people. Panelists that want to know now. We are on Trader 10 TV and CBC 94.7. So if you got links to share, just remember we are on 94.7 FM right now, and we are on Trident 10 TV. Mr. Eastman,
Yes, sir. Good evening to everybody. And
yes,
thank
I'm
you.
turning it over to you now, my brother, to introduce the topics and lead off.
All right. Good evening to Facebook. Good evening, world, as a matter of fact, because we are linked up via Trident 10 TV and 94.7. Thanks to Admiral Nelson, Anthony Nelson, and to Mr. Paul Clark and Kim Tara Clark of Trident 10 TV. And thank you to our panelists, like you said before. We really appreciate your contribution here, and we know that a lot of information is going to be shared here tonight. And I'm excited to hear the perspectives and the approach. So tonight on our panel, we have, first of all, Miss Nikita Vaughn, attorney at law, and also a musician, my friend. She's also a music tutor and creative director for NV Music. We have Miss Kelly Cadogan, one of my former tutors, vocalist extraordinaire, entrepreneur, visionaire, everything that you can think about. Kelly does that once it comes to entertainment and music. Mr. Day Brown, who I have not had the pleasure of meeting in person as yet, but I have been following his work, and he's a fantastic comedian and a creative person. I actually would have followed you at Parkinson when you left, because I went to teach there shortly after you left, right? So I didn't get to meet you when we came. Um, a gentleman by the name of Mr. Rodney Eiffel, who I've had the pleasure of working with over the last 7 to 8 years. I wouldn't say your official capacity, but you are here as a visual artist, and I appreciate you, brother, because of your vision, your understanding of art, and your passion for education of art, etc. And Miss Cindy Marshall, who I have never met in my life. I've heard about you through Sluggy. And she's a poet, and I want to thank you also for being here. The topics we're discussing tonight are: what is art, first of all? Is more attention paid to certain types of art, and why? How exportable are our cultural products? And what does art mean to the schools and our culture? All right, so those are the topics for discussion. But you know how things go, Sluggy. We digress sometimes, and we get a little outside of the box of the questions, and that is no problem. We want to encourage the panelists to feel free to open up and share your experiences. there are persons who will join in and share their experiences. I'll be watching the chat for any questions, etc. So I just wanted to lead off by offering the opportunity to anyone who would want to open the discussion, maybe with an overview or maybe attack one of the questions personally. If anyone had any thoughts that they wanted to share, I would like to open that now to you, to any of the panelists.
Well,
So open
in
to
terms
Rodney.
of
Okay, Rodney, go ahead.
yeah, I in terms of the definition of art, like culture in itself, I would say Raymond Williams, Murphy Arnold, those persons would have defined culture in itself as a very complex and broad concept, and similarly, the visual arts just as complex in terms of its definition. So, in terms of subjectivity as well, and we are human beings individually, art would mean many things to many people. But obviously, there's always the academic discussion or definition of it. And today, when you asked that question, I was just looking at a little research, and I was looking at the Dictionary of the Arts, and I came across just briefly, just outline the broad definition, and persons can feel free as well. But the broad definition would be art would include and possess all products of human skill, imagination, and invention. So it's more or less opposite to nature or, I guess, scientific discourse and process. And there's also a contemporary aspect of art. Contemporary really meaning in the now, or contemporary really meaning in terms of conceptual exploration of art and developing ideas that human beings can engage in, and are obviously would evoke some type of response. Even music, any performance for that matter, any visual medium, even the modern day mediums such as film and photography, and even the motion graphics, etc., are done in such a manner that they evoke some kind of stimulus that we can react and respond to. Even in our design elements, looking around, art is more or less in everything. So, in terms of the contemporary definition, art is, in terms of aesthetics, is based on the definition more or less of, they usually reflect aesthetics, which may extend to include literature, music, drama, painting, and sculpture in terms of those facets. And perhaps the most popular association with this term would be to define art as in terms of the beaux-arts, or the French term for the fine arts, and the folk art, the plastic arts, or etc. And as we live in Western society, because Eastern philosophies are different, African philosophies are different as well. But we tend, honestly, we have some kind of Eurocentric training normally that would start us off in our history in the Renaissance period, the Byzantine period. So more or less, since we live in the West, we have strong influences from the ancient Greeks in terms of how our society would judge or perceive art. And then you move on to the Aristotle perspective. The philosopher Aristotle, he sees art as imitation or mimesis or mimetic, and you could relate that into drama or film as well. And Plato, he obviously takes a more esoteric perspective in terms of seeing art coming from the muses or the gods for that matter. So, it goes on and goes on for different types of people and different types of cultures, but more or less art is subjective. And really, to me, it is something that is a discourse that the viewer, in particular, as related to fine art, when you go to a gallery, visit, or a museum, it evokes some type of response or emotion that you can engage with. But it's complex and
Thank you, Rodney. As I said, Rodney is passionate about the education of art and the history of art. And I would also want to take this opportunity perhaps to show our viewers the stuff that Rodney is involved with in terms of his own art. And I'll share this on the screen for the live viewers, and they can see one of the samples of Rodney Eiffel's work. Rodney, you may not be able to see it because you're actually in the stream. This is the By the Beachside
yeah,
one, right? I'm showing them. Right, so you
yeah,
can check out Rodney on Facebook, Rodney Eiffel, and his email is rodneyeiffelart7 at gmail.com.
seven.
Right,
Yeah,
so thank you for that perspective on the definition of art, and that kind of starts the ball rolling in terms of how we view art and what is art. So you're gonna open the discussion now and let me get into this thing deep and dirty, right? What what is art, and why are certain types of art seemingly more important? I see Dave Brown raise his hand because I know this is a contentious issue for you. So I'm gonna let Dave Brown get in on this one first. What is art, and why are certain types of art seemingly more important
Get in there, Dave Brown. Get in there.
Good night, manners, and sexy feelings. You hear me? You hear me loud and clear?
We hear you loud and clear, my brother.
Yes.
All right, good. Rodney thought he was going to quote Shakespeare as well. Hamlet's advice to the players, you know,
I left that for you to
show
do,
your
yeah.
own picture, scorn your own image,
Yeah.
and the very age and body of the time, his form and pressure. Which basically says that, you know, you're writing about life. And I think art is life, writing about life. You know, you express, it's just expression. Now, regarding we have to ask what Bajans think art is, if that makes any sense. Bajans value singers more. That's the post that Sluggy would have referred to. Even on that post, Sluggy, somebody saw that post. Somebody mentioned that I should start singing calypso, right? And some people that I know say, yeah, you should start singing calypso. That'd be real good. So people value calypso. If you want to go anywhere, right? If you want to be exported anywhere, maybe you should try calypso. There's no value placed on art, theater, and those modes of expression. Even in terms of the little thing they put out there for the funding for artists, is for digital media or perhaps calypso. It's nothing down the line of theater or film. It's mainly animation. I don't know if that, you know, helps.
I see.
But that's my viewpoint.
I see Cindy and then Nikita. Go ahead, Cindy.
I very much agree with Dave Brown as a poet, which is kind of like a little tiny section in theater. As a performance poet, especially, where yes, art imitates life and life imitates art, and we have that mimesis. But at the same time, I think that why certain art forms are valued above others, as Dai said, would be because unless it is exportable or unless it has been shown to be profitable by someone else, I think Bajans don't really grab on to the okay, let me invest in this, or okay, let me invest my money, my attention in it. And that's why things like theater, things like spoken word, even written literature at some points kind of ends up struggling. Yeah, so you have calypso thriving, you even have dance thriving, and that's great, that's fantastic. But there's so many other performances of our culture, which is what our art is. There's so many other performances of our culture that go under the radar because people have seen soca do well, people have seen dancing do well. But have people seen a lot of Bajans do well in theater? Not necessarily. Have people seen a lot of Bajans do well in poetry? Eh. And because of that, and because of the fact that that is an image that is perpetuated over and over and over again, because there's big events for theater, sorry, big events for calypso and not necessarily for theater, then it some things kind of sort of fall by the wayside because of that.
Understood. I appreciate that comment as well. Cindy, if possible, I don't know if you can check your input. We're getting a bit of distortion each time you speak. It's good now, but once you start to speak, you're getting a little bit of distortion. If you could check that. Thank you for your submission. I want to welcome Sean Lane to the room. This is BNHO Crochet. I'll give a little synopsis on him a little later, and we're gonna go over to Nikita because she had her hand up to share her views on what is art and why some forms of art seem to be more important. And then Kelly.
Hi, good night, everyone. Thank you to the moderators for having me. I would just like to say well done to my fellow panelists. I feel as though I'm back at UV days with the lecturer, and I think it was a great definition that you gave. So thank you for leading us with that. My contribution in terms of the definition of art was a little simpler, whereby I came up with art being simply the creative expression engaged in various forms. So the various forms that we have would be dance, music, literary arts, and that kind of stuff. And then from there, we will have our subgroups. And then the second part of your question, which was why are some of the arts seemingly more valued than others? I took a slightly different approach from my friends here, which is to go on to state that that is the case because of what people relate to, as opposed to what people see as commercially viable. People relate more so the average person, I would say, currently relates to, let's say, soca more so than they will relate to classical piano. Um, Playing classical piano is obviously still an art form, right? And it's a creative expression in this particular form. It does not get much value from the average person due to the fact that it's not related as easily as something like soca and reggae, which will be more popular because that's what is being fed into everyone's subconscious, right? So for me, I think it is more from the perspective of what is relatable as opposed to what is commercially viable. Because if we can, for instance, get more young people aware of the various art forms and we can groom them towards that, then I feel as though that would be the first step towards those particular less sought after art forms being more valued from a subjective perspective.
Nice. Thank you, Nikita. And over to Kelly. All right, losing Kelly there for a little. Kelly, if you could unmute your microphone. If you could unmute your microphone so we can hear you. And the other panelists, if possible, if you could mute your microphone so we don't get the feedback into the audio. I'm still not hearing you, Kelly. Still not hearing you. No, still not hearing you. Just make sure your device is connected. No, still not hearing you. All right, we can give you a chance to get that started, and I'll go over to Sean and just introduce Sean quickly. Sean is the creative director of BNHO Crochet, also one of the moderators and persons with this initiative, working with myself and Sluggy. And Sean, let us know what you want, if you want to weigh in on this perspective, given that you are a musician, an educator, and a creative person in the form of crochet. We were asking what is art, and why some forms of art are seemingly more important than others in society.
All right, good evening, all, and good evening for everybody who's listening on whatever channels you are. Good evening to all the people here. It's good to see you. Um, I only came in about what 4 or 5 minutes now. I was able to hear the last part of what Nikita was saying, and I actually agree with Nikita that um, it's basically about relevance and what you relate to and what is current in your particular part of the world. Because art is art is art, just like how music is music is music. It's just you got different audiences for different things. Um, I I'm I really just interested to hear what the guests have to contribute. I have my own take on different things, but I gonna listen and see where the discussion take us. There's only one thing that I would like to add right now is that, especially when it comes to visual arts and performing arts, that art without wherever art without an audience for me is incomplete.
Mm-hmm.
So you can create something in your bedroom and you think the world of it. If no one is there to share in that, for me, I think that that's incomplete art. It really needs an audience. And with that, I'm gonna go on to other people.
So they're saying like if a tree falls in a forest and there's no one there to hear it, did it make a sound? In a
Well,
sense.
it's kind of similar, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But it's like to create art, the creator creating it only for the creators to see or hear or
Mm-hmm.
enjoy,
Mm-hmm.
for me is an incomplete work. Um, it really needs an audience, and I think for any type of art, there's an audience. It's just how do you connect with that audience? How do you find that audience?
I like that.
You
Okay,
know.
so we're gonna try Kelly again, and then we're gonna go to Rodney because I see Rodney had his hands up. Let's try you again, Kel. Still not getting you. Still not getting no. Still not getting you. This was working earlier. No, still ain't getting you either. I don't know if you want to
You
try
may
to
have to exit and come back.
exit. See if you exit and come in again. Okay, we're gonna go to Rodney. You had a perspective on what Sean has said.
Yeah, good evening again. Yeah, it was Sean. How are you doing? Yes, my brother. Well, in terms of your comment on art needing an audience, visual arts in particular, I don't know, but well, not speaking to the current crisis situation we are in right now in terms of COVID-19, but the truth is that there are gallery spaces that do engage with the art, and there are museum spaces as well, both in Barbados and overseas here, where you have posting of collections and not only that, contemporary art. And there's even the Barbados Arts Council, of which I'm a member of. Neville Legault is the president there, Marley Clark is the vice president, and it has a thriving membership. And it's not really that expensive to join up. So even me as well, you know, in my other administrative life as a visual arts officer for the National Cultural Foundation is really a good experience to see administratively, but then as a visual artist now in this personal capacity to see both sides of the fence and have the opportunity to straddle that. So in terms of the ability for average everyday persons and from the public to walk into the Barbados Arts Council, for example, or to walk into the Gallery of Caribbean Art and view art, or to even know there's even a thriving online, international and local, and in my other capacity, we work on, especially now, online elements to manifest that thriving area in art. There's virtual exhibitions. There are all those things that can collect people. I think what we need to do is continue to sensitize the public, in particular in Barbados, because as you say, some people are operantly conditioned to certain art forms, in particular music. It might be louder, it might be out there, but then also through processes such as NIFCA or national festivals, we do try to try for excellence in the various genres of the arts. And that's the area where we do try to spread to wider Barbados, even in terms of people who wishing to perform or people who wishing to see something very tasteful and at a particular artistic level to engage them. But I think our work also is cut out to also sensitize through art appreciation and those things to our wider public, the role and importance of art in terms of making us human, art taking it serious as well as a career and job for practitioners and person in the job, and looking at it as a business. Because the truth is you will find overseas persons might have, yes, a bigger demographic, they might have a bigger support, but how? Because over the time they would have people sensitized to their art forms, and people can ably now come in terms of investors, private sector, those kinds of persons, and invest. Say, like for example, there's an artist, Joseph McGurl in the States, and he's considered a classical living master. He's a luminist, and he can sell a painting comfortably for like 30,000 US, 50,000 US dollars. Why? Because persons are aware of the kind of work that would go into pieces like that, and they will actually buy into a product such as that, a commodity such as that. So we also have to continue to put programming in the public domain, get people involved, because we have a lot of schools. All of us would have passed through primary, secondary school. They would have done our education program at the Barbados Community College, which taught us to teach art. And all of us would have had contact at some point in time is on the curriculum with art in our lives. Yeah. So I don't see now how then there will be this disconnect when you leave school or what have you. Even in NIFCA, young people do some brilliant prints, some clean prints, some wonderful lino cuts, and then to leave with that skill and let it fall away, I guess maybe because of our mental construct and view towards art not being taken seriously as a hobby. It needs to be addressed, more or less need to be worked on, because these are true skills that are highly developed in Barbados and other parts of the world that people actually make real living, even folk art from. So I think it is something that we constantly need to work on as amongst ourselves as a fraternity of artists and as a society in terms of our appreciation of them.
Thank you, Rodney. Thank you, Rodney. I just wanted to bring in some of the comments that are coming in from the live chat. Chris Harper, to you, Sean, said he disagreed with your point earlier. Perhaps we can go back to that a little later and expound on that. And he says Artists Alliance Barbados has at least 6 pop-up exhibitions annually. All right, I want to give Kelly a chance now to weigh in, and then we're gonna.
Before, let me just respond quickly.
Yeah,
I'm not saying that there are no outlets I was just saying that we need to connect our art with an audience.
Mhm.
I'm not saying that there's a void of places to do that.
Yeah. Oh, you understand? Understood. And we're gonna let Kelly Wayne. I want to get Sluggy in the mix quickly. I see Cindy raised her hand, and then I want to pose a question to Dai and Nikita specifically, based on what Rodney just said. So let's see if Kelly's is connected now and working.
I hope
Perfect.
so.
Yes,
Can you
perfect.
hear me?
Yes, please. Loud and
Oh,
clear.
beautiful. Okay. Good night, everybody. Um, so I was saying before, for me, art is the creative expression of thoughts, ideas, emotions
Mhm.
presented in a tangible and in an intangible way through using our sensory, emotions like sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch, right?
Yeah.
I do agree with Dai when he said that refer to life being art. I actually have that written down here.
Mhm.
Why is more attention paid to certain types of art? Uh, I think it's just what we've been taught.
Mhm.
If you were taught that classical is great, you would embrace it. If you were taught that jazz or soca, calypso, so it's what we are taught, I
Yeah.
believe.
Mhm.
Um, and there, I think a great deal of it is politics. You would see when a certain government gets in, something is going to be pushed more than the other, etc. Politics is definitely a part of this entire thing. I think, though, that we as the people, we have the choice when we are educated to much is given, much is expected.
Mhm.
So like programs like, I'm just not talking about music, I'm talking about visual arts, etc. When we get into a form or space where we have you're educated, given new knowledge, etc., we have the opportunity, therefore, to create new platforms and to change the conversation.
Mhm.
So while I think the why is important, the question more for me is how we could change this dialogue, to make it really ours as Caribbean people. So I think that's my 2 cents. Really. I'm just happy that one can hear me right now. So I will remain a little later.
We appreciate that. No problem. Let me get Cindy's response, and then we're gonna get Sluggy in, and then I'm gonna pose a question to Nikita and Dai. So Cindy had a response to what Rodney said, I think.
Yes, I did. Is the buzzing still there?
Yes,
It
your
might
audio is
actually
much
just be my
better.
laptop,
The audio is much
unfortunately.
better. Yeah, the audio is much better now. That's great.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So what resonated with me about what Rodney said was the mental conditioning, and I think Kelly reiterated it just now, where we have essentially been taught to like certain things, and because of that, I think a situation exists where a lot of the Barbadian public does not necessarily know that they want different art, that they want different art forms, and then it means that the Barbadian public is not necessarily receptive to the art forms, and it's not necessarily their fault. That's just how it happened. But then again, the question, as Kelly pointed out so rightly, is how are we as artists going to change that conversation? How are we as artists going to connect to an audience? How are we going to show the audience that our other art forms, besides the ones that are pushed more often, so to speak, are relevant and have merit and are not just hobbies and are as serious as businesses as the music and culinary arts, for example,
Mhm.
and even visual arts. So it's the onus is on us as artists as well. And I think Nikita really did start that point rolling in my head as well. Um, coming from it, coming to the conversation from a subjective point of view, and because of that, we really need to sit down and think together as let's use the word, for lack of a better word, marginalized art forms, how we are going to overcome these barriers.
Okay. Cool. And Sluggy, you wanted to weigh in on anything here?
Um, yes, my brother. Thank you very much. Um, loving the panelists and the views and the discussions. For me, what I gather, and Dave Brown is one of the people that really triggered my brain to make me pay attention and say, he's being right. He simply posts on Facebook, singers, I just paraphrase, but singers get paid, but people that make people laugh is seen as court gestures. And then I start in my mind like thinking about the conversation with friends and family and what they normally see as art. And most of the time when they hear artists, they think a calypsonian or a soca artist. That's the first thing in their mind. So then I was saying in my mind, like I love calypso and soca, but when I think artists, calypso and soca don't come to my mind first. Because it when I study what art is, like art is so wide. That way
Yeah.
you got culinary arts. That's how wide arts is. Like someone putting food and different things on a dish, Randy,
Yeah.
and how they take and like we were showing me in Trinidad like, how
I good know. I
thing
good
how
know.
it make it look and
I
how
good
it
know.
look it how it look is play with the mind. Like you was explaining it to me
Mm.
like in Trinidad earlier, you know what I mean? And then I was thinking about what our conversation, you know that is true like how chefs put food on a plate, how the plate is situated, how the forks are placed. You know that way I
Presentation.
call it culinary art because there's so many different things. The colors you use
Yeah.
in the pot, you
The
might use red
flavors.
peppers, green peppers, yellow peppers, make it more appetizing. And then I think about, but when I see certain colors in food, I would think Mexico.
Mm.
So if I see a food that got a lot of yellow and red for whatever reason in my mind, I guess it's from being able to travel a lot. If I see like a lot of yellow and red and a lot of corn, I think like Mexico street food.
Mm.
If I see a lot of greens in the food and a lot of gravy, I think like Southern America, like South Carolina, which I could trace back to Barbados, because our food similar. So you see South Carolina food and Barbadian food similar. So that's culture and art, and that's only food. That ain't music yet.
Yeah.
That's life. Like so when Dai said and Kelly said that is life, like that is life because you eating.
Mm.
Like Sean was speaking about him clothing, and Sean was speaking about he pattern certain patterns and then study pattern online. So that is clothing. Like we have to wear clothes. We gotta eat to live.
Yeah.
So those arts are so important. And then laughter,
Mm.
like study like the sweetest form of entertainment. We love music. We are all musicians, but a good movie, laying on your bed in a good movie after a tired day, hearing music in your ears all day, or watch some boy like Dave Brown in a comedy skit making you laugh, like that's heaven. All right, especially after we go to rehearsals all day or something, you want something to eat and you
Yeah.
want a movie.
Yeah.
Like so,
Very
there's
true.
so many things that are so important that is art, Randy, but we
Mm.
don't see them as art because I know you when I can answer this, but I feel is that the celebration. So certain types of art will get celebrate a lot, so we see that as the art. But we ain't studying you.
Mm.
You had to eat
I
today,
see you,
though. You know
Rodney.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Culinary art is more important. You know what I mean? I'm not saying any more important than none, but I know we study food first and
Mm.
we study laughter first because we could be brat. You could don't got the music, and once you got something to eat, you could laugh. Be you got the world.
Is it? All right, let me throw this. So I had another question. But let me throw this question. Is it because of the glorification of a specific type of art here in Barbados that all the other art is seen to be inferior because you have a competition based platform which seemingly correlates to some winning of money, and it is glorified because of the pomp and pageantry that comes with it, the touring. Is this perspective the same in other cultures and in other countries, or is it just here? Right? I can open that to anybody to jump in. See, Kelly had her hand up. Rodney had his hand up. Anybody could jump in here.
Yep.
All right, Kelly, go
I
first.
would say yes. Crop over. I wanted to be a Calypsonian when
Really?
I was like 10 or 11. I didn't know
Really?
nothing about jazz. I didn't know nothing but
That's a
I would
shocker.
hear class. I wanted to be a Calypso. You all can hear me, right?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah, yeah.
Good, good. I wanted to be a Calypsonian because that was the music that was being played in my house,
Mm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
That was all I was hearing during that particular season, right? Um, so I think it comes back again to what we are being taught. What way is that we being sold to us? And I think that the element of competition is destructive.
Yeah.
It has its place, but it's destructive. If you look at creation, God created us to be creative beings.
Yep.
I think competition is a systematic disease, right? That's me personally.
Right.
Now, to exist in this world, etc., there's the element of competition, etc. But I think we have pretty much been taught to turn against our own selves because we are taught competition from so early. So therefore, the element of us stepping out and being creative beings becomes stifled. And the only way that it becomes livable and a place that we should really embrace is when the outside world tells us that we are good. We need to believe that we are creative beings and engage and have these conversations and create, etc., as we go on. When we remove competition, just like how the school music festival was a competition,
Yeah.
right? They took competition away from it.
Yeah.
And now children are feeling like, I want to be a part of this
Yeah.
because it's a showcase. It's for me to pull out the best of me. So I think, I don't know. I know there was a time in the correct me if I'm wrong, 70s, 80s, where there was a music industry in Barbados, right? And it was thriving. Maybe competition was there, but when people come and put certain mindsets up inside of here, I think that's where we start to fall. And competition has a big part to play with it because it starts to be competitors. We are created to be creators.
Exactly.
So that's my response to your statement.
And my thought is always that nobody should be able to judge creativity in a sense and award, because whatever you create, that is your right. It may not be as good as another piece of art, but that's another discussion. I don't want to get into that. I saw Cindy's hand up, and I think I posed something to Day Brown and Nikita and Rodney. Sorry. So Cindy and Rodney, and then I'll pose a question to Day and Nikita. Go ahead, Cindy.
I wanted to say, as a poet, and I'm a young poet. As a young yam, I know come. So I still learning, as everybody is still learning, yes, but I'm a little earlier in the learning curve.
Right. No problem.
But the reason that I wanted to do poetry, to do spoken word poetry, when I was a younger yam, when I was like 7 and 8 and 9 and 10, and I didn't even really understand what the words were. My mother to take me to the Nifka Gala to watch Adrian Green. And I was like, I want to do that. I know he doing, but I want to do that. And coming into the poetry scene and realizing, I'm realizing more and more how much a certain line of his work rings true every single time I step on a stage. In his piece, Word Work, I believe it is. I hope he don't get vexed with me if I'm wrong. But in his piece, Word Work, he says he wants to change the perception of spoken word from empty old talking to meaningful mic rocking. And the reason that stays with me is because it comes with recognizing the fact that because spoken word is very largely something like it's like social commentary. It is a critique art a lot of the time. When it is not just an expressive art, it is also a critique art. And I think, and I may be wrong, I think sometimes poets operate at a disadvantage where if we're always critiquing, people like, oh, you ain't got something positive to say. Geez, on bro, why you can't make me laugh? Geez, on bro, you always gotta be crying down this or crying down that. And when I think about what Kelly says about what we're taught about what art does, a lot of the times people will say, art reflects life, yes. And art is supposed to make you feel good and make you feel something. And I wonder, and this anybody can answer if they feel it's a question, but I wonder sometimes if it is because spoken word is used so much to critique that people are like, you know what, we're going to just leave spoken word over in the corner. It's real great at NIFCA, but otherwise we can just do all the feel good art.
What you saying there reminds me of something.
So that was my comment.
I think I saw Debron post something about the social commentators are no longer feared because they've watered down their art in a sense. I'm not quoting you verbatim, but I think that was the gist of what you were saying. That at one point the social commentators were feared. So, if you're a poet and you are doing that, I think people more so fear what you have to say. They may not want to hear because that's not good, because you have the right to challenge people. And if people are challenged, then then you're doing your job as a social commentator in the poetic sense. Rodney, you wanted a thing, and then I'm going to post something to Diane Nikita.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand and it's very good to have the discussion robust and real about your feelings, because these are often discourses and conundrums that we find ourselves in terms of exploring the human aspect of the arts, but also the interesting thing in my experience being a visual artist and is that the element of competition, similar to exams, is like it puts you in an interesting area whereby some people really try for competition. You know, you see it even in international competition, the cook-offs, the art shows, they do all kind of creative things. Even the readings,
it's showbiz.
Competition, even
showbiz.
though human beings tend to not want to acknowledge it, some people still have this adrenaline thing for competition.
Yeah.
What I would do is say that sometimes it's a choice too, because some people often art is subjective, we understand, and some people it's hard to criticize it. To me, it's very hard to assess it. How do you do that in terms of? But to me, that's really choice coming. It's difficult. It's nothing easy. But the competitions for all societies we recognize in some form in the art still exists in terms of assessing. What I find peculiar about it and interesting is that competition helps to somehow drive someone, like a theme. Like, for example, when we have national themes, some people hate themes absolutely, and some people love and adore themes. And the interesting thing is, some people you give a subject matter to work with, they come up and explore and brainstorm and produce some interesting, they dig deep and maybe otherwise if they were not given that theme, maybe the outcome might not have been how it was. The other interesting thing about it is that is the competition aspect, and you would have vented your feelings on that, and I believe the wider society will have their feelings as well, including myself, but it is sometimes something that we have to carry on with, and it is something that still adds to the discourse of the humanities and the arts. But also the other aspect of it, in terms of the interesting aspect of curating the show now, you would meet with an individual artist. I know my colleague Janice Whittle or Andrew Wells would do that in terms of doing their exhibitions, and they would, or Neville at the Arts Council and his group would meet with artists or the other curators on the island for that matter, Mr. Rez Hajdi, and they would, or Denise Minardonish, they would then look at the artist's oeuvre or body of work and how they're working over a period of time, and they make some selections based on the progress of that work in particular, whether it be subjective or contemporary. And then they would decide to select pieces for a particular display, like maybe in a solo show, for example. And obviously they would get your catalog written up. And that is a show without an exhibition, but what it does, or even if you post your works online, whether you enter your work in online or group exhibitions or what have you, like in my particular case, personally, I would have, and I encourage artists to do that, get your own cards, now I could say that, invest in your own things as well, because you would have institutions and government establishments and private establishments who might be there to help and facilitate and show your work and represent you. But it's also a good thing also from the artist's perspective to also help market themselves. Even if you have a good friend that can help work with you to market or package or move to that business aspect, and then you would then be able to develop a website or whatever works for you and make your, but you have to keep the art visible in the space. And that is why something like, for example, on plein air painting or painting outdoors, that French term, for example, it becomes important, because what I do personally on Sundays is when I have time, free time, I would stay outside, and I'm painting in oil, so it's very, you have to have ventilation. And I stay in my yard because it is next to the beach and very scenic and relaxing. And what I do, I leave my yard open. And what is good is that being present outside, people pass, they say they never see anyone painting like that. Other people like Neville and us, we go out on plein air expeditions, not only through the NCF, but privately. And we just paint outdoors to keep art in the presence of the public, because that in itself is a performance and transforming the space. People like Fielding Bob, the late Fielding Bob, God rest his soul. These are people that how I became and made my choice now, because I would see Adrian Compton in the 70s, and the 80s, he would ride a little motorcycle and come down into St. Lucie here by me and draw pen and inks of chattel houses. I would see Fielding Bob painting that palette knife in pastel all over Spikestown. And so the artist to me is like a great communicator to society as well. And when I see the young people coming down to the sea at Port Ferdinand and Port St. Charles, and they pass by and they say, "You, check down my work. I like that painting. I like the colors." And you engage them. And even in my experience, a youngster, he came into the yard and actually was able to offer him free lessons and things of that nature. And he continued to draw. He continued to show me, he got enthusiastic. And that is me. I really believe even all of you here that I would like all of you to turn to visual
Well, you were
artists too,
supposed to
and be
invite me to
musicians and
the
everything,
entrepreneur.
and convert the whole world.
You were
Yeah.
supposed to invite
So
me to the
I think
entrepreneur, so you forgot
yeah,
about
yeah,
that. You need to
Randy,
invite me
you're
there. Yeah,
always
of
welcome. I
course, I
mean,
got a little art skill
even
too, you know.
randomly, it don't have to be structured, and we can go
So
and explore, because what it does for you, it only fine tunes you with nature. It also fine tunes your eyes, and it helps you to have a new appreciation for humanity, and also it records tangible and intangible heritage and culture as well. Because, for example, you might paint a house that 3 years from now might no longer be there and might somehow historically become
exactly,
relevant, and
exactly.
then you have that image.
Yep.
So I think that it is really still, apart from the competition aspect, I think you should explore them in all their wills. It's just up to the individual. Some people are driven by the competition. Some people cannot take the
But
competition.
your
But I agree
comments
with
just
you,
now,
art is hard to
you're right.
judge. It
Your
is hard
comments
to
just
assess.
now strengthen the argument in that you were able to receive comments from persons who passed and they saw, in that open space,
Yeah.
and they're able to compliment it as opposed
Especially
to
young people that you
putting
can
your
mentor and you
right.
can get them interested, because a lot of people don't know that they got jobs like conservation. You could pay a conservator about 300 US a day.
Right.
They got things like curating and basically taking care of art, and these people do academic research. They work in museums, in the Metropolitan Museum of Art and European museums. There are jobs that we really maybe in our school system need to be more aware of when we do the school fairs, like how we still introduce the police officers and the other people. We could have like specialists, and I know with ICOM, I used to sit on that. We would sometimes have a presence there to handle information and literature, but we still need to dig deeper and drill down to make sure that we show the people the importance of doing these. People often think that museums are boring, but that's far away from now. There are actually very interactive programs that emphasize on sound and the whole experience, where you can live with your family in a room and experience that. And even the synergy of us working together. Like, we have a poet here, we have musicians here, and we can have a jam session where you interpret art. And I think from back in the day with Carol Roberts Reefer, or now Chief Executive Officer, and then continuing along that line through the various forms of Omawali and those persons we used to, and they also added to it, have evenings of interpretations during crop over, where you just bring musicians together, put an art piece there with the artist, and challenge people to interpret that piece
it
poetically. And you would be surprised at the spontaneous creativity, because creativity in itself as a word and as a means, and creatives coming together. Dai Brown, I think he was part of that too.
I actually did a
Doing
performance like
drama,
that
doing
already
dance.
through Sister
Yeah.
Spencer Cross. Sister
Yeah.
brought me together with an artist.
Yes,
a
Miss
guy named
Spencer
Adrian.
Cross.
Yeah,
That,
she
that
said,
is what I like.
I want you to play,
We
and the
throw
artist
aside
is
all the
going to interpret
criticism
it.
and play.
Yeah. So I want to enter
So
some
I think
things
all
that
those
come
things
in.
are relevant.
Some other comments coming from the chat. Chris Harper said, competition limits true creative expression, rules and guidelines, boxes in creative freedom. Michael Andrew Griffith, sorry. It is also important to bear in mind the link between the culture in your DNA and the art that appeals to you. When I hear certain musical rhythms that originated in Africa, I feel an automatic emotional response that I don't get when I hear Mozart. So I want to jump to Dai and Nikita. Nikita as an educator, Dai as a performer, would you, because I am not aware of any comedy competitions, would you enter a monarch of comedians? And Nikita, you as an educator with your kids, would you encourage them to compete against one another in their musical space?
I listened to I mentioned it to Sluggy. I think it was Paul Ennis who said that competitions are for amateurs. And I think that I agree with what Kelly said earlier.
Paul Paris. Paul Paris. Yes, Paul
Right.
Paris.
I got it wrong there. What you say?
Yes.
But anyway, I
Paul
agree
Ennis.
with Paul Paris. Paul Ennis. Right. He was right. And going to what your question, right? Comedians have to work together. The other day we did a show. It was Sun Rock, Nala. Then we did a show where it was Nadia Phillips, myself, and Nala. We have to come together. Competition is not going to help us. What is competition going to do? It's going to give one person a prize, but there's no industry. The competition on the whole destroy industry. It destroys careers. Okay, you put everybody up against each other for a small period of time, and then okay, that's it. Go back and do your normal job.
Yeah.
Okay. Going back to what Kenny said, I had to make notes because when it was getting long fast. But it's what we are exposed to. Okay. No matter how talented a young singer is, or artist, or actor, or poet, when them get to a certain age, their parents are going to say, all right, go and find something proper to do now. You understand? My brother said about connecting to the audience. This is the issue. It's systemic. If you connect to the audience, like Cindy mentioned, Adrian Green. Adrian Green is one person that connected to the audience. But then where is Adrian going to go afterwards? When he wants to do a project, when he wants to get sponsorship, and he goes to business people. Some of them he may have went to school with.
He got singing pickety crop.
Let me
He
say
got singing
something.
pickety crop.
What's that?
He has to sing and
He
pickety
got
crop
singing pickety crop.
to get.
Say again?
He has to sing at
He
pickety
have to
crop
sing in pickety crop.
to get notoriety and association.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is what I mean.
Right now,
You's a poet. You could write saying, I write saying, go and sing. And you can see Adrian Green doing the ta 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 ta. So Adrian like singing. But what I'm trying to say, you could connect to your audience. But this is Barbados. I have a movie, a hard movie that everybody read that like. I have plays. I have concepts for TV shows, all this sort of things. Nobody ain't tell me, although they like my stuff, they are not going to put any money behind it. Another point, somebody that I went to school with, who is a successful businessman, will see me and say, man, you got enough following, you got enough thing, but you ain't making the money though. Understand? And part of me would be saying the word that I that part of me would say, you know, this man can easily sponsor you, give you a label and make you look good, to use snapper term.
Yeah.
But they will not, because it's competition. This is ego society. If me and you went to school together and you make enough money, I can't let Brown come now and make a little money. I'm not asking for comedy to be up on the same level as Calypso.
Yeah.
I just want value for what I'm doing. We just want the systemic view to change. Let me get some funding. Let us do away, especially NCF, large of Rodney, but
he's not here in that capacity. Rodney isn't here in that capacity, so we will leave Rodney.
We have to do away with the competitions and try and build an actual industry across the board for everybody, the poets, the singers, everybody.
So Nikita, your perspective on from a music educator standpoint.
Yes, please. Thank you for the question. With my students, I encourage them to compete against each other. Just to divert a little bit from the common view so far, I think that everything has its place. I think competitions have their place. I think exams have their place, but it's kind of like a double-edged sword. So with a competition, with my children, my students, I call them my children because I love them all so dearly. But with my kids, my students, I will have them, come together and use and bounce off of each other their creative ideas, so that in the end they create something together. And then we will most likely have, if it's at the end of camp, we will have a end of camp showcase, and we would just have them perform their own pieces that they would have arranged by themselves, or they would have composed by themselves. So that is the kind of energy that I like to expose my children to, not competition against themselves, but more a competition from within themselves to be the best that they can be, and then fuel each other to then be the greatest collective that they can be, right? Now, having said that, there are a few individuals that I would suggest do certain competitions that I see come out here or there, whether it be locally or regionally. And the reason for that is because of the preparation that usually comes with it. When you have something to prepare for, you generally tend to go crazy about it, depending, of course, with your personality, and then depending on the type of tutor that you have. I'm kind of hard on them, but the atmosphere in the classroom is always one that it seems to be laid back, but you still want that distinction at the end of the day. So they compete with themselves to get a distinction, because that is what we we foster within. So when they get anything less than a distinction, they feel like, ah, I really could have do better here. I'm going to do better next time. And that's because of what they have accepted their standard to be based on what I have told them the standard is. And the standard for us at NV Music is excellence. Excellence is the only standard. That's our motto.
Yeah.
So there are certain times when a competition will be helpful. And then there are also times when, let me just not deal with a competition there because it will stifle you, it will stifle your creativity, etc.
Right.
Similarly, confidence is something that I like to build with them. And I find doing exams helps with confidence building. Right? So it is okay to say, okay, we doing creative expression and we learning the piano or we learning bass guitar or we learning vocal training or whatever the case is. But if you don't have an outlet where you can put yourself out there against the world, then you may be losing touch of what more you can do, right? And I find that the discussion or the narrative of society, and as Kelly would have mentioned before, the politics need to be geared towards how best are we going to use art to help our children become better adults. Because at the end of the day, when these children grow up, they're the ones who are going to take care of us, That's my concern is when I get old, what these young people can do for me, right? So really and truly, we need to get them to be empathetic. We need to get them to be aware of their potential, aware of their power, and that comes in various ways. Confidence building is one of them. Realizing that you are not everything. And what I generally do in class sometimes would be if we are doing a group project in whatever way, it could be fun, it could be something for marks or they're presenting in class or whatever. Whenever we're doing something as a group, if one person gets it wrong, everybody gets it wrong. Because I tell them, if you are in a band setting and you are the drummer and you mess up and do bear jump, it's not only the drummer that sound bad, it's everybody. So you have to have accountability now too, to understand that what you do affects others. So music, the arts, dance, culinary arts, which was a really, really good example from Sluggy, comedy, all of these things play a part. And every child that comes to us or every child that goes to mommy and daddy and says, you know what, I'm real interested in theater and acting though. It does not necessarily mean that they will want to be an actor or actress, but the art form and the discipline of that art form can help them to become a better person who, by extension, they would encourage other people simply by who they are to be better people themselves. And then just bit by bit, we will change the world.
Agreed. That's a very good point. Yeah, Sean.
Nikita, you basically touched on some points that I was saying last week and the week before, that we as educators, and it's good that you understand this, that we might be teaching a music class, but we cannot expect that these students are going to grow up to be musicians. That the most we can expect is that it touched their lives in some way, that they can be better adults, as you say, and inspire others. And not only that, they can be the persons who enjoy the music that artists are putting out, the persons who patronize the events and can appreciate the arts. We might be teaching our children to appreciate art, even if they're not artists themselves, because we need that. We need to teach the audience of tomorrow, just simply by being in an art class.
And if I can just jump in here real quick, Mr.
Sure,
Moderator, I'm so sorry.
No, that's fine.
But if I could just jump in here real quick. Even with some of these summer camps or Christmas camps that I do, case, which we start from the very beginning. We have committees. So we have friendly committees, and at the very beginning, we decide who is going to go and what. And every single day, maybe every other day of camp, we are doing a event coordination course too. So we're planning the concert. So it's not a matter of just Auntie Nikita is going to plan this concert and then you come and perform. You have to understand what goes into the other aspect of being a performer, you know?
Agree.
So I've realized that aspect of my method of teaching them really assists them. I mean, I get a little pay at the end, you know, so that they feel like they worked for something.
Yeah.
And they're really excited about it because it teaches them financial literacy as well. And I just find that as artists and educators within the arts, we have a great responsibility, and it's not something that should be taken lightly, because for me, for instance, a lot of my influence came from my music teachers.
Yeah.
Janice Millington, Cynthia Austin, Roger Gittins, Kate Spencer.
Yeah.
And all of these people have influenced me in such a way that I think helps me to become a better lawyer. And I kid you not, sometimes I use
a better liar, you said?
Lawyer, attorney at law. And I find that sometimes I'm creative with my arguments because I've tapped into the creative element of my mind. So the arts assisting me with being able sometimes to just look at a paper and read and digest it at the same time without having to go back. And I tell the story all the time that when I was studying law at UE, I would practice piano for like 4, 5, 6 hours. Wake up early in the morning, and that's all I doing. Sometimes my parents would be begging me to eat breakfast, and I wouldn't eat it. But I would just practice for 4 to 6 hours, and then I would go and study. And by studying, I mean just read once what it is that I'm supposed to read, and I will remember everything.
Mozart, it's called the Mozart effect. You can research on Roche et al. Roche et al. 1997.
I can't understand it, but that is what has happened, and because of that personal experience, I tell people all the time, listen, classical piano is the way to go. Whether you want to be a classical pianist or not, go and learn classical piano. Get your nephews, your
I get some
nieces,
feedback
your
from
children.
if you can mute your microphone. Somebody's microphone needs to be muted. I just like your Rodney. We get a lot of feedback there.
Oh.
Yeah, go ahead, Nikita.
Get everybody to be doing classical piano. And that is not to say that the other, I see Sean laughing, get them to do classical trumpet too.
Yeah.
Kelly, get them to do vocals. Cindy, sistering, get them to do poetry. Di Brown, comedy. Everything is everything. It's still all the same thing, you know? So it is a matter of tapping into the other side of the brain to foster something more.
Okay, so Rodney had a point.
Yeah, well, yeah, respectfully, colleagues, not to belabor the point of competition and everything, but I mean, in terms of, well, you mentioned the exams and how you had to deal with studying the law and how helpful the music was in terms of that side of the brain, the creative side, and you had to read the thing once because your synapses were fired up, you understand? So you stimulated that for quite a few hours, and then once you read it, then it was internalized and ingested into your long-term memory from your short-term memory. I'm not a psychologist, but just saying that indeed you see the not only the therapeutic additions of the art forms that we practice and execute, but also the role, as much as we don't like it, and until humanity maybe come up with another system, some of us at least, from exams and competitions. The interesting thing about it is on both sides of the fence, the analytical elements that these factors develop. For example, with judges are forced to assess the elements, for example, in our case of the visual arts, the subject, the form, and the content of the piece, the composition, the 7 elements speaking to art. So they are forced to analyze that and put it within a rubric. And this happens even in CAPE or CAPE examinations. I remember back in the day at school, we had to do a 10-hour Cambridge exam. Mr. Nick Riddle was our teacher at King's College, and we had to sit a 10-hour Cambridge exam and show 10 hours of artwork within that analysis. Just like yes, so we have to write essays, etc. So in terms of that, it forces the individual to focus and concentrate and maybe challenge themselves to build the skill level in terms of the genre and the area you're representing. Because even within this now in the world, there's a little bit of contestation between the contemporary schools, and to me is no need to, because they both can both coexist, and the schools that which are the conceptual schools and the schools that like the artilleries that develop high skill sets that you find in Europe and parts of New York and America, where in England, where you have persons drawing the bark plates, for example, and doing size drawings and doing copying, for example, from a drawing, and then doing Grizel or doing monochrome studies into full color studies in terms of the technical ability of art, and then the highly taught art in the contemporary schools of highly conceptual art. Those two to me can marry well because it arms the artist with a potent set of skills. And even speaking to our master artists here from Wayne Branch, the Ras Akim and Aishi Butcher, they had gotten us in the biennales. I think it was 92. You could correct me on that. The year 1992 and 1996. From my memory, I'm getting old, but I for sure I think remember 96, where Barbados, little Barbados, went up against big countries in the world. And you know, Caribbean art is one of those art forms that are lost. If it wasn't for Wilfredo Lamb, who died, I think, around 1980, 81, who brought attention to the Caribbean. A lot of the Caribbean issues dealing with issues of migration and those types of things and identity. But if you really realize that Caribbean art is not as heavily looked at, and Teresa actually would write these in her discourses as well. People like Stanley Graves and Aishi and those people develop iconographies in their work that are almost completely different to the visual iconography expressed in the world. And what is good about the competition aspect of it and the analysis aspect of the art is it forces you to read visual culture, which is very significant and important, because then you will have to be able to break down the story of what the artist is visually translating. Just as an example, if somebody's musically expressing something or in a dance form or in a poet form, you should still be able to be engaging enough to try to read it and read the expression and the communication. And that is what makes it really, really human. The other interesting thing is the role of art and science, because people don't realize, but there's also a lot of science in art. Music is the science of sound, visual arts is the science of color and things of that nature. And there were even scientists who got creative artists to examine the genome of the HIV virus in terms of trying to problem solve why it was changing, proteins were changing within that particular aspect of the virus. So art still became very relevant. And what is better suited than even the whole entire cinematic effect, which combines not just Hollywood cinema, but first cinema, second cinema, that combines the whole genre of sound, acting, almost everything falls into the aspect of film in terms of the modern art forms.
No, go ahead.
No, yeah, I was wrapping up. It's really the fact that it might be a bit of a bugbear, but it also causes competition, analytical skills to develop, and it also pushes the performers, etc., to explore their art form to push the boundary, so to speak. In that aspect,
I want to jump in because in your context as a visual artist, the specialists who will judge your area are specific to art. In the case of music, it is a bit more complex, and not that music is any better than art, because obviously visual art, it has its own difficulties, its own complexities, etc. But when you're judging,
not across you, but not necessarily specific to art as well. We have had psychologists before sit on the panel to analyze art, and people who were completely outside of the visual arts, like a layman, cannot have that bias too. So right. We would have had that as well.
That in a sense, we would have had conversations or questions raised about how music is judged, given that music has so many synergies in it. To judge one song, you're looking at lyrical content, so you have somebody who has to understand literary devices and poetry in a sense. You have the musical aspect, and you may have a specialist on the literary side who may not have the understanding to judge the musical components. And as you said, there's analysis, there's demystifying of the art by those specialists in your particular area as well too, right? So that's also something to consider with the music. That's something, a question we're gonna raise after this. I saw Sydney had her hand up, and I'm gonna let Kelly weigh in as well too. Go ahead, Cindy.
I wanted to expound on something that Nikita would have said about the benefits of teaching art and being a part of the artistic community, because again, as a young yam, Rodney talked about 1996. That's when I was born, so a lot of that stuff kind of, but it is what it is. But I found that, especially recently, being around artists and being connected to artists, and this is not just within poetry, this is poetry, drama, music, dance, all the gamut of the arts. It makes you more empathetic. Also, I've learned a lot in terms of like history and more about Barbadian culture just by being involved with other cultural practitioners. Obviously, I'm not gonna know it all, and I didn't really like CSAT history, to be honest. I didn't like it, and I didn't really learn that much in CSAT history, unfortunately. But being around artists who are aware of the history of Barbados has made it possible for me to love history. I didn't like history at all. Like, you couldn't get me to do it if you paid me. I did not like it. And now it's like, I want to know more. I need to know more. And that is so important, because you want to raise kids with a cultural awareness of where we're at and where we've come from. And, I think Kendall Hippolyte studied him in sixth form, and he has a poem called Night Vision, where he says, because we see with history, it is difficult to see through it, and yet we must, or we become nothing else but history. And that was like the first time I even thought of liking history, and coming into a space that is so charged with people who know what they're talking about, who have done their research, who have studied cultural studies and history and art into the minutia of it, makes you that much more aware of the world you're living in and the country that you're living in, the space you occupy in that realm.
Understood, Sydney. Thank you so much. And Kelly, you have anything you want to weigh in on? You're mute. Unmute your microphone, Kel.
Okay. That happens a lot when you have a 4-year-old and you have to keep the classrooms unmuted all the time.
No problem.
Yeah. So I have a couple of points I want to make based on the conversations that were happening previously. That you had mentioned about the guy, he made a reference to you in terms of him making money and you not making money, right? And his attitude, pretty much. And one of the points I have here is, while we are teaching we're learning arts, right, and being involved in it, it is absolutely critical for us to build our inner man as it relates to our integrity, as it relates to our responsibility, as it relates to accountability, as it relates, there's so many layers, because success is just not the money. I really believe it starts from on the inside. How are you going to treat the other person? So what's your attitude towards life? What's your philosophy? All these things, I think, go into play with, as we are building and teaching and creating art, what it is we are really, what's the foundations we lay internally. Because maybe, just maybe, he had a different understanding of purpose and what he's here for, etc. He may be having a different conversation with you, right? Because I think that's part of the element that well, yes, as I said, it's great to make money, but it's really, what's that other element internally that we leave in, and the messages we passing on. Otherwise, this crab in a barrel mentality going to keep happening all the time. We can change it, but it also has to do with how are we building our inner man. What I would say is, Nikita had said, how best are we going to use the art in terms of your children to become better adults? And I thought it was interesting that you said so, because I know you're teaching primarily kids. My story is more of working a lot more with adults in terms of teaching them how to sing. And what I've discovered through the process is that they too even though they're adults, they're rediscovering things about themselves that people said to them artistically they could not do.
Could not
You
do.
can't sing, you can't be this, you can't, the can't is happening there, right? Or it was just this thing in their hearts that they feel real passionate about, and they know that when I sing, I could go and face that job. I could go and deal with my boss. I could go and deal with my family because singing allows me to express my full creative self, right? So initially when I started getting into not realizing that part of my purpose in life is to teach people how to sing, especially adults. I said I was going to focus with starting with adults. People look at me like I was crazy, like how you could do that, they nobody want to sing. So that's the conversation all the time because it is not the norm. Nobody want to do it, but maybe that's just the niche. And we need to have the conversations about niches, or is niches? I'm sure want to correct me if I'm wrong. Niches, right? But the element also that um Crochet said, oh gosh,
Sean, yeah.
sorry, Sean. Sean spoke about laying foundations because very often, as soon as you hear or see somebody being involved in art, people not sometimes say, you know, you want if or singing. Let me speak about my area in terms of singing. It means to them that person is doing voice training because they want to be a singer. That is not the case. You just want to be able to fill that creative space and sometimes be the best and be in touch with yourself. If by doing it you discover, wow, I didn't know that I had all of that down in there and I want to take this direction, I really want to make this into craft, that's great. And I think that's the mindset needs to change concerning when a person becomes interested in a creative area or more than one. It doesn't mean that doesn't define who they are. It's a part of who they are. And the last thing I would say is that I can't remember. You all can go ahead.
Sluggy, we want to get Sluggy in on this point. 'Cause I know he's very
Um,
passionate about this as well.
yes, please. Quick before my point, I remember because Kelly's the person who really made me appreciate the art of singing. Yes, it was singing for years before I met her. Was fortunate being police band. Was fortunate to tour, but I've never at that time taken the voice, um, break it down to understand different parts of your voice and why different parts of your voice operate like this, especially if you feel like this or if you eat or drink this. I didn't know that those things was a fact because for me, like everyone thinks like you are a really good singer, so I just thought it was very good. But then when she showed me those simple habits, like we put in your body, when you put it in your body, then what you are thinking about at the time, what you are thinking about the day before, the week before, and before you do this art. And then when it got in, quite a lot of sessions were one on one. So we used to pull down songs, Randy, and the day we was pulling down a song and upstairs in the piano room, and it was for like my second juries. And then Kelly asked me what the song was saying, and I said what the song was saying. Then she asked why would it say that? And then when she asked me why, I didn't know. So then she tell me, well, you are not sound good singing the song until
You don't
then.
understand it.
And then, but I thought that it sound good, that everybody's sluggy's demand. Then, when they understand why the song was saying this particular thing, was studying what I put in my body, was studying what I put in my mind. Then the next week, the song sounds so different. So then I was looking at Kelly like, whoa, this is weird. This is real weird. This is just voice
Revelation.
training. Then watch it now, Randy. Remember having this conversation, Randy? We went into ethics. So in ethics, no, like, here exams. So then I remember Kelly showed me how to break down songs, how to break down meanings. And then Randy, I say this all the time on air. Randy showed me a technique where you could get all A's. You can even get 100, but you don't know nothing. You don't understand nothing. You just get the A. So I start doing that. Start seeing the marks improve. Then it went ethics, Kelly. After Kelly's class, we used to have ethics, and ethics teach me about a man named a German philosopher, Immanuel Kant.
Manuel
So
can't.
Immanuel
Yeah.
Kant had the art of reasoning. So it was looking at the art of reasoning from Emmanuel Kant, how Kelly showed me how to break down songs here walk. It's so close. And this had nothing to do with music, but it was so close to a vocal session. And Canon, actually, our buddy Randy Cannon Noel Burke.
Yeah.
Cannon Noel Burke was my ethics teacher, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And in that class from there, you know, I never got anything wrong.
Canterbury deep.
And that taking what he learned, and me and Canterbury is great friends up to today. Me, him, and Darian Oliver from Trinidad, you know, like I showed Darian, I spoke to Darian about certain techniques. So I learned how to break down things, how to dissect everything, and I learned that in a vocal class. I learned that in a vocal class, not in a philosophy class, not anywhere. I learned that in a vocal class, and I play it to me how we learn things, and it's been great from there.
And
So thank you very much for that. Thank you very much for that,
ahead,
Kel.
Go ahead,
You're
Sean.
most welcome. My pleasure.
Go ahead, Rodney.
Sluggy, it's
Yeah.
funny you about that because I remember being in I remember going to my first Janice Millington class at 16, and at 16, for all those who don't know me, I had playing real trumpet at 16.
Yeah.
5 years old, you mean? From
and,
5 years old.
And I went to Janice thinking that I could play. And I remember I had a piece that I was working on for my first diploma exam. And Janice saw the composer's name. She saw the name of the piece. She looked at the harmonies and the melody. And she said, she heard me play a few bars and she stopped and she said, listen, bring another piece. You haven't enough life experiences to really play this piece the way how it's supposed to be played. She said, when you, I can't remember the exact words she said, but basically, if I had to find words to explain what she was saying, she was like, basically like, if you're married, having an affair, a lot of outside children, and can't pay bills and all, that is when you would understand how to play this piece. You know, it was so emotional, the piece, that she was like, no, you ain't got these kind of experiences yet. Obviously, I had a clue what she was talking about at 16.
Right.
But you live and then you tell your students, you ain't live enough to play this piece because you do understand, you know.
Even with young persons coming to record.
I show you something, right? That is like when Kelly asked me Sluggy what the boy say. And they didn't understand what they're saying. I understand what they are saying, but I didn't understand in the context of what I'm reading why they are saying it. Like why you saying this? You know what I mean? So like when Janice tell you don't live enough experiences, you don't understand the why this piece supposed to play like that. You understand? So that was the same thing, Kelly. Two different art forms, but still the core,
and for the
dissecting is the same.
Right, for the ones who want like a 2-minute classical lesson, here's the thing, really fast and simple. The trumpet, the modern trumpet as we know it, wasn't invented yet. You had a man called Anton Weidinger. He came up with this way to play the trumpet, to have the chromatics basically. Before that, the trumpet was just in the harmonic series. You could play simple melodies, fanfares and that kind of thing. But Anton Weidinger found out this way to add keys to this instrument to have all the notes of the chromatic series. Now, Joseph Hayden, everybody know him simply as Hayden, composed this concerto for this newfangled instrument, and this is one of the most famous trumpet concertos, the Hayden trumpet concerto in E flat. And the funny thing is that everybody came to hear this trumpet perform, and they're expecting this fanfare, pum 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 pum. But that's what the trumpet was playing before. The trumpet ain't playing do re mi fa sol la and all of these kind of things. No, it was never that. Now, I attempted to play the Hayden before I learned the history of the Hayden piece. But it's funny because in the beginning, the trumpet starts, so you got this big orchestral introduction, and then the trumpet come up with this pam and stop, and then the orchestral exposition continues. And And at this time, if you can imagine an audience coming to hear this instrument and go like, "But I know special," you know, and then the very next time the trumpet comes in, and somebody playing the Hayden trumpet concert.
Yes, that's it.
So the very next time the trumpet comes in, the trumpet goes do re mi so do re mi fa sol la ti do, and audience gone wild. The trumpet just played a whole major scale, and that was the first time it was ever done. No, me at 14 playing the Hayden, I didn't know this. As far as I'm concerned, this is cake, a scale, you know. But but when you put the history in it, when you understand that this was the first time anybody ever heard the trumpet play these notes, you interpret it so differently. It is now more pompous, more look at me, hear this new thing, you know, and throughout the entire, and then for the second movement, it going to a traditional folk song that is reserved for traditional instrument, not the trumpet. So you are now in that frame of mind, and this for the persons who talk about, man, this classical music thing, I don't care about that, yeah. No, it is much more than just sit down and sip a wine and listen and enjoy life. Well, for me, that's my 2.5 minutes.
Appreciate it, Sean. I saw Nikita wanted to add something there.
Thanks, Randy. So it's just so interesting that so many people are stating that their music tutors influence them in some way, and more particularly, in order for you to play a piece properly, you had to understand the piece before you even start to play, right? Based on what Sluggy was saying, from what Kelly taught him, based on Janice Millington, from what Sean was saying. And I find it very interesting because my other piano tutor at the time, the late Cynthia Austin, she also did the same thing with me. But she did not tell me, you know, Auntie Janice was a little rough around the edges sometimes.
A little.
So she didn't tell me, you don't got the life experiences, you're going to get something else. She approached it from a different angle, and she was a little more gentle. And I find that I take that approach from Miss Austin with my teaching more than the approach that Janice Millington had, right? Even though sometimes that has its place, but I can't get rough with children. I just can't get through. But Miss Austin, with the gentler approach that she had, she would tell me, give me the name of the composer, the time period that this piece is from. I would like you to research all of these different things. And then I would like you to play this piece. So she forced me to put myself in that composer's frame of mind when he was composing the piece, so then I'll be able to play the piece. And then I had to have an appreciation for the history of music within that time, the period of music within that time, so that I understood how best to execute certain notes. Because as we will know, back in Renaissance time, when you see notes written without a slur marking, it wasn't to be played the same way as, for instance, the Baroque period, when we see 3 crotchets without the slur marking. These same 3 crotchets, but then written in the Renaissance period, played differently from when it was written in the Baroque period. And just even understanding that made so much of a difference, because then you went into the history of the piano. It didn't have a pedal then, so you wouldn't have been able to manipulate legato markings. So all of that came with you inserting yourself, whether you experience it personally or not, you inserted yourself into the mind and the intention of the composer, so that then you will be best able, with your own life experiences, to be able to play in a way that is palatable to the audience, but then also connects with the audience. And also going based on what Sluggy has said, from what Kelly had taught, big up yourself, Kelly, because it did teach me too. Right? Back in the day, it is very important what you do with your body, because you're the vessel. You are the vessel that connects with the audience. And if you don't have connectivity, then what really are you doing? And some of my best performances are when I am preparing my body more than I'm preparing the actual classical piece. When I every single day waking up, drinking water, eating fruits, doing yoga, which by the way, I also have my children doing yoga when we're at camp. All right, guys, it's Reflection Friday. Everybody come. We're doing yoga. We're reflecting on our behavior during the week because we do that as well. We sit down on Fridays when it's camp time and we reflect on the choices that we made during the week, the good choices as well as the bad choices, and you're accountable for the bad choices that you made. So then we sit down in our little circle, we sit down and we write on the good column what we did that was pleasing to everyone around us. And we also write what we did that would not have been pleasing to the people around us, to ourselves, nor to our parents. Correct. And usually I join in because, you know, even as a teacher, it does not mean that I am perfect in how I interact at all times. I may be hungry and became hungry, and then I may, you know, raise my voice at a time when it really wasn't necessary. So I also participate in it. But I find that when you go into that type of understanding your body, understanding your mind, understanding your spirit, then you're best able to put yourself in such a way that you're able to play freely and openly and be vulnerable, because nobody likes to be vulnerable, especially on a stage when everybody looking at you, seeing into your soul. Yep. Nobody likes that, right?
Rodney, I want to pose a question. No problem. This one is for Day. You know, like with musicians, we play a lot of other people's music. So sometimes we're reading or sometimes we'll listen and try to play back. And so we interpreting a particular person's artwork. I guess with some spoken word artists and poets, they might be reading other person's work. I know there are persons that into the visual arts that might create works from other artists in terms of recreations. For a comedian, do you like listen to other comedians, and you know, like how does that work? Do you, because it's all of your material, your own, and is that the case for comedians, and is that the accepted general norm, that comedians create their own jokes and
We're
stuff?
gonna Cindy first.
I think Kelly.
Cindy first, and then the Cindy first. Cindy has something to say, and then the
Oh, okay.
Cindy.
I'll try to make it brief so we don't forget the question. I just wanted to point out, in the same vein as it happens with music, no, y'all got me want to study classical music. Thanks so much. But studying literature is one of the biggest influences on the reason I'm a poet. And I think that the biggest word that comes out of what Kelly would have said, what Sluggy would have experienced, and Sean, and what even Nikita touched on, is empathy. Art in general, I find, teaches you to be empathetic. Yeah. You can't put yourself into the mindset of Shakespeare writing a play, or Mozart crafting a symphony, composing a symphony, or I do not know any comedians, I'm so sorry. Or any visual artist creating a painting. You can't put yourself in those mindsets without trying to be empathetic, without trying to understand the psychology of it, the effects of everything going on around them on why they created art. And that is like that's one of the best things about art to me, honestly, is the ability to learn to empathize with other opinions, other points of view, other walks of life. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that we miss a lot in society now. That we are sometimes we're really short-sighted and we don't empathize or try to empathize with others. That was my 2 cents.
That comes with the appreciation, which Sean would have mentioned, having an appreciation for art. We, as musicians, we look at music appreciation. but I think general art appreciation is something that is needed. That will come in a further point. So Sean, I'm gonna let you pose your point to your question. Sorry,
Right,
today,
yeah.
yeah, and Rodney has something
Just
to say after that as well. So
how,
pose the
how
question
does it
again.
the
Comedian prepare.
comedic world um, deal with other comedians in terms of like
Referencing,
relating to each other and their work?
referencing.
All right. Firstly, in terms of the first question you asked, it gotta come from your own experience. You know, you gotta find your own voice, what it is you want to say, what you think is funny, and come from there. Read other comedians. This guy came in here and disturbed me the other day. Show your face, quick. Show your face.
That's quick.
Yeah, good on. Now.
All right.
Yeah, so
Right. So
How's that,
comedians
brother
gotta work
Ali?
what's going
together,
on, Simon?
right? Comedians gotta, you come and shout me. We gotta work together. Understand? So I want to say though that it's like we talk a lot about music. So it goes back to the original point that musicians and music are held up higher. Okay? Going back to what Nikita and the others were saying, I have no problem with arts in schools. I have taught Randy and Mixu, as you said, and I have taught at Praise Academy. I'm a good acting teacher. I like that. I'm an actor and writer primarily. I've been labeled as a comedian here because I'm an actor, no more for comedy. But I have a long stretch of theater work as well, work with this guy that does Peep 10 or whatever. So I have no problem with arts in schools. Definitely, if you're going to be a lawyer, learning arts will definitely benefit you. No matter what you do, it will benefit. My issue is, and I've stated this on Facebook as well, when people get to a certain age, when we get to the age where, okay, it is now time to commit to a career or whatever, people will tell you, all right, that's a hobby.
You can't
That
down,
down, you could do that. You could do that for 3 months in Krapova. You could do that for Nifka or whatever. And that's my point because I am a living artist. I'm somebody that half in, half out. You know what I mean? I full in head button. So I am going to be slightly biased.
Totally understood. That's understood. And Rodney, you had.
Yeah, and that's where we collectively need to work together as colleagues and as a society to change it. And also as artists, I would encourage everybody to make the world now, the globe, their home in terms of using the modern media that we have, the Instagrams that you see a lot of other international artists do, and we do it too, Facebooks, your websites, market yourselves, get yourselves out there. And also and synergize with other persons in the world who share similar disciplines, and many of us here, I believe, are multidisciplinary as well, because you got some visual artists tend to like to play musical instruments and vice versa, and performers, etc. So some people are multidisciplinary and stuff like that. And what I would like to see too is in terms of the creative industries moving forward in Barbados, along with the wonderful educational backgrounds and masters that I heard you illustriously spoke about just now, is that those master artists, we need not only to keep the memories of those who would have passed, but those who are currently living. We have to recognize in terms of the educational infrastructure in Barbados, very well put together from primary education, because when we did our education, we were taught to teach art in primary schools. And I don't think the program is at BCC anymore, but it was a wonderful program in the sense that you were taught to teach children, understand the development stages of children. And I know all of you who have little ones, some degree or the other, if not your own, but little ones in the home setting, they would have like what you call the pre-schematic stage of child development, the scribbling stage, first of all, where they just have a piece of paper. And we all went through this in the scroll. There was a lady called Rhonda Keller who studied 5 million children drawings throughout the world in the 60s. And she was able to realize that children, regardless of race and whichever part of the globe they were, had certain commonalities in terms of expression. And the importance of art we should incorporate even deeper into the educational system from earlier, I feel, is that you should, it helps the problem solve, just like how Rubik cubes and just like how Lego pegs help to solve things. The role of art in problem solving from an early stage in terms of helping you mathematically and otherwise, because there are people who are what you call internal, and then there are people who are very visual in terms of problem solving. So when some people say that a child, for example, is not learning well, it might not necessarily be that, but it might need to just adapt the necessary tools, and visual arts or music or drama might help to re-emphasize or even enhance that. And what we also need added to this, not not only in terms of the children development stage. And children are very innocent in terms of the rules, not just learning the scribbling, the pre-schematic, the schematic, this gang stage are moving on. But children are also, we also need to inculcate from very small a culture of visiting museums again. I know people go to the museums and stuff, but to change the concept in terms of learning about your local histories and your visual culture and how to read it as well in a very basic way. And then we also need the implementation of a national gallery as well. I think Jamaica has one. But the truth is, I believe even on the administrative side and on the individual side, the Caribbean in itself, the Caribbean space is faced with problems and challenges of funding and the necessary support that I think we need to work towards in terms of the world weighing in and helping us to advance beyond that and getting our art recognized. Because as we say, the Caribbean to me is one of the happiest places with our calypso or carnivals or basically our general expressions. And I think we need those infrastructures built out. I saw the when I worked in Carifesta, the Trinidad Performing Arts Center there, a huge undertaking. I'm sure they had their challenges with that as well. But the point is, when you see these centers, I feel again, one specifically, eventually over time, I'm sure our administrators are working towards that as well. And I hope that one day it would manifest like Jamaica, that you have basically throughout the region main centers where persons can be hubs for hosting these events once we get past these various challenges we have now. But that one day we will have centers where we can. And Carifest, I believe, is doing that with the work of Dr. Nurse and those. They are doing forms where the Caribbeans, as defined by Mr. Alsop, can get together and define our own aesthetic, because we also need not only historically but otherwise to also ensure that our people define in terms of not being acculturated and in terms of even elements of cross-cultural fertilization. We look inwardly as well in terms of our local context and define what it is to be Barbadian. And through these institutions and through what we are doing here, through your musicality, learn to tell local stories through the music, through the writings, through the readings, through the film, through the art, and develop own local Barbadian iconographies that will help to more or less reinforce this and in terms of embellishing our identity, move towards that in terms of how the creative industries will be progressing. There are also the art directories and stuff. Persons should get involved and sign up with these things. Seek the funding that is available, even though some people may not feel that all the institutions can do everything, but they may not feel that all the funding may not be there, but at least try to explore this and try to work together to see ways and make valid suggestions that we can get the necessary infrastructure going and the necessary investment in the art. Because people should even put in 3% in the art to purchase art. No, they're building local art. Employ the artists, employ visual artists.
I'm glad you mentioned funding. I'm going to let Cindy pause it, and then I'm going to pose a question to the entire panel. One I wanted to mention previously, but I'll let Cindy pause it at this time first, and then we can go back to that. Go ahead, Cindy.
I wanted to highlight the point that Dai made about the critical age where art becomes a hobby, because I feel like I'm probably somewhere around there. But that to me is one of the most destructive mindsets that we face as artists, where we have been conditioned to believe art has to be a hobby and it is not a viable business here. That is one of the hardest things we have to combat as artists. And being a full-time artist for a lot of people is laughable, and I think it needs to change. It really does.
All right, cool. I wanted to expand on what Rodney is saying in terms of funding and pose a question at the same time. But before I do that, Rodney Curtin in the chat mentioned that teaching art in school is a start. However, it is competing with the popular culture, and that is the major challenge, competing with the popular culture, as an art form. What I wanted to pose, however, as Rodney mentioned, accessing funding, etc., and that kind of ties into one of the topics that we have for discussion tonight, is our cultural product, or are our cultural products exportable? And the question by extension, how do we synergize with the corporate world to access that funding, to attract corporate Barbados to us as cultural entities? Now, in saying that, I'm also saying we should be focusing on creating our art, But in our environment, we have been charged with being a twofold kind of an entity, in that you have to create, you have to understand the business side, you have to then create for the business side, in that you have to create those proposals, you have to understand the accounting, all these things you're expected to do as a creative entity, which necessarily does not always augur well for the creative process, right? So
Grant funding. Yeah.
right, and then we want to access funding. You can't present a proposal properly. That is not something that is advantageous to us. It doesn't augur well for the development of us as a creative people. So I wanted to weigh in on that with Nikita in her capacity as an attorney, and how do you think we can look at that in terms of development of the the facility for artists to have persons to lean on for the creation of proposals, further understanding of business when it comes to the setup, what is required when you present to a funder, potential funder, etc. Just let's expand on that point, and what do you think about what is said in terms of having a twofold synergy or twofold approach to being an artist or creative with business and creation.
Yes, so I am completely in agreement with all creatives understanding the business element of being a creative. And you, I don't remember, Kelly, back in the day, you had lent me a book. I'm not sure if you remember the name of the book, but I think the first line of it was, just because you're in a business, it doesn't mean that you know the business of that business. And I didn't get to read the rest of the book, but that stuck with me. Right?
I love that. Say it again for me, Nikita. Say it again for me. Say it again for me.
Uh,
Just because you're in a business doesn't mean that you
just
know
because you're
the
in a
business of that business. I love it.
Correct. Just because you're in a business, it doesn't mean that you know the business of the business. Because Kelly had lent me the book, it had belonged to someone else. They wanted it back. I didn't
Yeah.
start to read it yet,
Nikita,
so I had to give it back.
you read the preface and that was it.
Yeah. Before moving forward.
Nikita,
Yes, Luggy.
you do know you know that was so honest, right? Like
But
that is
it's
to me
true.
where you are. That was so honest.
She get past the acknowledgement, Sean.
Right, and the title, Randy, get past the title. I don't remember the title, but the thing is that particular line stuck with me. So thank you, Kelly, for lending me that book. Right, and I am of the opinion that all artists need to understand business, right? Um, I try to teach it to my kids as much as possible, and I also am always open to doing forums, workshop, anything along that line that would help artists and creatives. So I'm not forgetting you, all the creatives, Rodney, you too, right? In terms of the creative business, how are we going to use um, or rather how the creative side of things uh, blends over into the corporate world. And sometimes it's just having another pole to bridge a gap. So we have this pole here about being creatives, and we have this pole over here in terms of the corporate world. We need a bridge, and that bridge, in my very respectful view, is someone or a group of people who straddle both sides to allow you to, just put that plank down and you walk over to the other side. So to answer your question, Randy, workshops whereby you allow creatives to know what a business is, how you can register your business, incorporating a company, difference between registering a business and incorporating a company, when you need an attorney at law, when you need one, the fees that are necessary to happen, and that can budgeting, knowing your accounting, understanding that you need to open a bank account for your particular business, and it's just so much. So we as creatives, we can't sit down and wait for corporate Barbados to get on board. We need to be able to say, all right, you know what? There's a lack of knowledge within the creative industry as it relates to corporate. Let us get some people who know about it, who are willing to talk about it, whether it be freely or otherwise, underlining or otherwise, and they will be able
I
to
see you,
say,
Day. I see
you
you.
know what, we have this workshop going on, come into it. Everybody invite the people within the creative industry into that space so we can all learn at the same time. Because this person may not have the time, to be honest, doing it individually all the time, especially if you're donating your services. But if everybody gets together and say, all right, you know what, we have this particular person that we view as being knowledgeable within the industry, let us jump on that. You know, so we need to take the reins as creatives and make things happen. Because the only difference that corporate Barbados has, barring of course money, is the fact that they make their decisions themselves. They create their businesses, they incorporate their companies, they select their boards, they have their meetings, they raise funds and capital, and they do what they gotta do. They don't
Yeah.
ask anybody for
They don't
anything.
ask exactly.
They do what they have to
Exactly.
do. So we need to do what we have to do. We have the mental capacity to do it because there are different types of intelligences. And all of us here are well articulated. I am so impressed with everyone. And you know, well, everybody's not in corporate Barbados. So we have is to be confident enough to say, okay, this is what I want to do. I'm going to create it for myself.
And
And
the
as a
fact
collective,
and the
that's
fact you
where we
said
need
that
to.
too, Nikita, we are part of corporate Barbados because if we take that business savvy approach, then we are corporate because it is a business.
There you go.
Entertainment is a business. So I think shifting the mindset,
Exactly.
having a paradigm shift in terms of how we view ourselves. This is something we always hear. See yourselves as a business. See art as a business. I don't want to expand too much because I want to give the panelists a chance to talk. So Day and Rodney, I saw you had your hand up earlier. Go ahead, Day.
Yes, rightly so, Nikita, if I could call you Nikita, Miss Vaughn. But what happens when 5 years ago somebody like you told me that? So then you go and you do the workshops. You learn how to write a business post. You do all of these sort of things. You do your pitch decks. You join the Cultural Industries Development Act. You go and you talk to Ramona Gibson, Grandison. You get all the
Grandison.
info. You
Oh
write down
dear.
your proposal. You
Oh
send
dear.
it to Ramona. How it look good. It look good. Take out that and put in that. All right, thank you. You do the proposal hard, the project hard, and you send it to the people, and you don't get a response. That's why it goes back to what Kenny was saying. Understand? We got is how what they're taught.
Mm,
People will see that, oh, somebody write a proposal. Oh, it look good. You write it up good, but they're not going to fund you. And that's the problem. People have gone to workshops where they bring in people from overseas and say, this is how you sell your art. But this buddy is selling art. What you know about selling art, big man?
mm.
You know something about standing up on the stage and talking for you. Okay, we got, all right. No, you got to learn about marketing. You know, you have to do all of that. Okay, you got money for ads? No. So what I'm saying, let me get back to my main point. My main point is yes, I agree with what you're saying. But when you write your proposals, you take your time, you learn to write the proposals, you do the research, you got all of that sort of thing down pat, and you send it out to a business community that doesn't care. Understand? That does not value what you send out and what you put your hard-earned time into. I don't like writing. Tell me write a script. Tell me write something funny. I go a proposal now. Like,
You see, that's what I was saying because creators
yeah.
want to focus
And
on
it took my time to do it,
right.
but yet when you take your time to do it, Randy, nobody's responding.
Yeah,
What
you
is Barbados?
because then you want to focus on creating. So, what I was also asking is, should we look at having a strategic alliance with some corporate entity that will assist creatives in the development of these
What
particular
corporate
plans?
entity are you referring
I,
to?
I don't have any in mind. Just throwing the ideas out there for us to look at it and
Several
decide.
of us, 'cause I've been in it for a while,
Mm,
okay? You could reach out to managers, people that know the corporate world. These
yes,
people will be the liaison, they'll be your manager, your agent, whatever. And that hasn't worked.
that hasn't worked either.
Understand?
Yeah.
So what I am saying as a guy with experience is that yes, I am agreeing with what you're saying. You have to um, write your proposals, learn how to communicate with the business world and all that stuff. But yet when you go and you do that
You
still,
still being
you're
turned down.
still hit a brick wall. In my
Rodney
experience.
wanted to come in.
That's
Cindy
the experience.
and Kelly.
Yeah, sorry to hear you had that experience and it was happening to other persons. But I know you invited me personally as an artist, Mr. Eastman, but I cannot, it would be remiss of me not to even mention. Well, there's
I do
Mr.
not.
Hoyt there,
I
Mrs.
don't want to put
and
you in
Ramona.
a.
You
I
would have
don't want to put you
mentioned
in a
her.
compromise.
And grant writing itself is uh, uh, an area that has some degree of peculiarness and particularness about it. But I just wanted to introduce to you all, the panel and other persons out there. This is a COVID-19 is entitled Creative Technical Assistant Grant, and you can find it online on the NCF's website. So as an institution, the NCF is still going for www.ncf.bb, and you can access these as well online
Rodney, Rodney, you
to
do.
assist you.
Rodney, sorry, but you brought it up.
Yeah,
You brought it up.
yeah.
What is that grant for?
But you go on
It's
and
going
check
for
it out. I'm just here in a
digital.
personal capacity, but it is
I will. Rodney, at this stage,
there's a number of things listed here.
I'll interject,
But I
Rodney.
just wanted to introduce it that you could check it out.
I'll
Are you
interject here.
reverse hard, boy? You could
I'll interject here.
I just wanted to introduce it.
Let me see him, Rodney here.
I want to on
But
that road.
it's important that you are made aware that you could check out the relevant sources. I'm
Let
just
me
introducing
see
the
if-
sources
I have-
that you
Let
can
me
I
see him,
literally
Rodney.
have-
Let me see him, Rodney here.
The farm. That would be a segment. Anyhow.
Okay. But check it out and go to the relevant persons and speak about it.
But no, I want to make the point. This is supposed to be for all artists, but it's really for digital projects and or calypso. Silence. Okay.
No, I'm just checking it out. But I would believe that that department you should really get the details of. But I just wanted to just share with you that there are institutions and
I think Rodney, I think that what Day is saying that he has checked it out.
Yeah.
So I think it is insulting to say he should check it out when he's trying to tell he has checked it out.
Yeah. Not specific to him. My apologies. But I was just saying that in terms of having explanations of it that I cannot provide right now, that it is best to maybe meet with the persons involved. But just wanted to share that information with you for not being selfish or anything. But there are things over there. Yeah. Not taking something.
Kelly was trying to say something just now.
Yeah.
Yes, Kel?
Yes, please. Couple things. Right. So, Dai, and kind of to answer the question of agreeing with Nikita in terms of understanding the business of the business that you're in, right? Dai made a very interesting point, which is you send in the proposals, you do all the right things, and then what? About 15 years ago or more, I was trying to get funding to go to Berkeley. Was really excited. It was like, yeah, boy, I got the, I guess scholarship. I got finished, get some money. And I sent to all these sponsorship letters and got one response. It was over 100 I sent in. It was a lot to me then. And I got one response, and it was for cheese for Emerald City.
Wow.
I was very grateful for the cheese.
Wow.
But when you say cheese, you mean the money was small, or when you say cheese, like
no,
because cheese got different connotations. You mean literal cheese that you slice and put in bread?
Who took the cheese? You took the cheese to Berkeley, Kelly?
So the cheese this is what I ended up using the cheese for, because what I realized then, right? And I'm not saying this is what you're not doing, that I'm just putting out there from my experience and offering some suggestions, right? We have been taught the traditional approach. What I ended up doing was saying, look, I know what skill I have. I don't have to try to prove to them what skill I have and why they should come and work with me. What I decided that I was going to do, I am going to create my own skill. I'm going to use what my gifts are. So I created my own show, right? In doing so, I was able then to pull together people in my community, in my space, to come to pay money to see me do what I do so that I could go to get, to study. What my suggestion is to turn the whole thing upside down, Day. And this is just not for this, for everybody else. Because the perception is still there of arts as it relates to what art is better than others, etc., right? And then the question is, corporately, they're going to be asking how much money you could bring me, right? If you're not in that position at this stage, step back and start building your own super fan base. Find the people that you know can pay and follow you to Timbuktu to hear what it is that you're doing.
Yeah.
So my suggestion would be to start, because then when you start creating your own following, then the corporate people, then you could at least tell them what it is you want then, right? You change the conversation. What I would say though, I just want, and I'm not the part with the digital thing. If it's something that there's money there and you're interested, create a digital platform for what it is that you offer, right? If the cheese move with it. If they're not doing digital, fine, because there are ways in which you could use your craft digitally. And it's the interesting thing about the COVID-19 and digital is that it's just not Barbados anymore. You could create a whole other universe to follow what it is that you do. Now, I'm not saying that's not what you're not doing. That I'm just saying based on the conversation that these are just things that came to my mind that I wanted to share. And maybe you, in terms of if you are the creative mind, maybe partner with somebody who can create the proposals and the projects for you when necessary, can help you just to focus on the creativity part, because it is not easy. Blending business with creativity is a skill you have to develop, and you're gonna fail a lot of times, but you keep going at it. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay.
All the suggestions I have heard, as I said years ago, and I would have to implement, including trying to work with people, as I mentioned before. The reason I wasn't on Instagram, people were telling me go on Instagram. The reason why I went to Instagram, because I did a play called The King, about King Dell. I did a play at the museum. Then for 3 nights, it sold 9 tickets over 3 nights, not 1 night, 3 nights, 9 tickets. Then Laura Zane came and did a play and sell off. I said, "Where we going on here?" I didn't know the man about Instagram. I didn't know all that stuff. So I have went to Instagram. I have built my following. I got over 11,000 followers or whatever. People meet me on the street and they love my work. But what does that mean when you say, okay, I write the proposal and then go into these people and they want investment? The same people are going to look at you and be like, okay, whatever.
But what
you
saying is change the narrative. Don't go to them. What you're saying is do not go to them. If you got 11,000, if you have 11, I'm just saying those were different options. If you have 11,000 people following you, right? And each of them pay you $100 a year, right? I'm just saying, right?
No, they're not going. Let me hold on. Sorry, Kenny. People tell me this all the time. I have even put out, give me $1, $2. Beijing's are not like that. They're not a culture like that.
Well, we're not talking about Beijing. We're talking about the world. And if you put $2 on,
I put it out into everybody.
Kelly,
so what I'm saying is, all of these suggestions I have tried. I can stop. I gain down the road. You understand? I'm just communicating to you guys. Everything that you say, I agree with you saying, Kelly. I agree with you saying, Nikita. Trust me, I understand. You're right. I'm saying that I have listened. I have followed that. What those suggestions, and still hit a big
what I'll say here, right?
I'll go to again after vacate.
No problem. I'll go to Cindy and Nikita, but before we go there, I wanted to say that what I agree with Dai, because again I have faced that as well too. Where we've had the syndrome of animal farm, where all animals are equal, but some are more equal than others. And you have a case of, I'm very surprised that you don't have sponsors knocking at your door. But what you're saying now, I can relate to it, because we see people accessing these things, but others are not privy to having that access, and that's something that you really can't explain. Is a kairos moment at some point. Some people may shake the door at the exact right time, and they're able to get in. Others may be knocking for years or for a very long time and may not. So I'll go to Cindy and then Nikita.
My point, I think, redirects the conversation.
Your audio is buzzing again, Cindy.
Cindy, you're charging your laptop?
No, I ain't changed nothing
from
before.
A load buzzing.
Yeah.
Maybe laptop fan working overtime. I don't know. Maybe. It must be not a custom.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
No problem. Go ahead, Nikita. Let me let Cindy work it out, and then we can come back to Cindy. Go ahead, Nikita.
Okay. So, hey, hi. All I am saying is,
The rhymes.
right, is I agree with Kelly. I understand what you're saying, and I get you 140%. Honestly, I do. I don't know if it comes down to a gender thing, right? Or if it comes down to a time period thing, or whatever the case is. But sometimes we just got to do it on our own instead of asking someone for something,
Yep.
right? So if I mean sponsorship would be great. Everybody will love sponsorship. I will love sponsorship as well. But at the same time, it don't belong to me. Them money is them people money. You know what I mean? They don't have to give me anything. They don't have to give you anything. They may got to give BNH or a thing nor Randy.
Correct.
Right? They're not obligated or in, and we are not entitled to receive it because it's not ours because we didn't work for it. What I did, like from 2013 or so, my mindset changed in terms of how I view money. What I looked at was what can I offer in exchange for someone giving me money. So I don't look, or my perspective is not I gonna make money. I'm always saying how can I earn money? What am I doing? What product or service do I have that is of value that someone would say, you know what, I am going to exchange this amount of money for it. And when you get to that realization, then even accepting less than what it is you decided your worth or value is for your product or service does not even become an option because you say, no, this is my fee. Of course, you may have a situation where you say, all right, based on the surrounding circumstances, they're going to do it for less because of the person that's come to you, but you understand your value, you understand your worth. So having said that, corporate Barbados, yes, they may have a lot of money, but they have a lot of debt too. They have a lot of expenses. So when they have earned the money that they have earned, why would they give it away? What value are we telling them that they're going to get for in exchange of the money?
Which is
All
why I
right.
mentioned
Right?
You see that I'm sorry though, Nikita. How you say that proves my entire point. You know what I mean? But what I will say, I gotta go. But what I will say is that I have been doing money shows. I agree with what you're saying. So I say, you know what? They bounce to use Bayesian, they bounce to give me nothing, right? So I've been doing my shows, my stand-up comedy shows, and I try to market it the best that I can. If people come and support me, so be it. But now COVID has come around. COVID caused businesses to shut down. Everything is shut down. I haven't done a show in 3 or 4 months. It goes back to the farm there, Rodney, and all that sort of stuff that was supposed to provide us help. The whole mentality has to change, even from our own artists. So this is a when you say earn, the people in here grumble. Everybody here started grumble because of that word earn. It just have a different connotation. It's like, as me as an artist, I ain't just doing nothing. Like I want to do movies. I need funding to do movies. I want to do theater projects. I need money for that. I could go if people can come out in the mini road and watch me, I would do it. But they can go in the they can go to the bathroom, and if the rain fall, and then but I want to thank everybody. I got to go.
thank you
Plug
so
it,
much,
give
Dave.
thanks.
Thank you, Dave.
Very nice to meet you.
Yes,
I was saying I didn't remember you at Parkinson, but you said we missed.
Yeah, yeah.
Cindy, I would like to see some of your work. Kelly, great to see you. Blessings to one on Rodney. I gotta make a move.
No problem. Thank you,
All right.
Dave.
yeah, I
All right.
appreciate.
Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate you, my brother. I really, really appreciate you for real.
Give thanks, brother.
All right, so
All right,
Cindy,
people.
you let's go to Cindy. Hear what Cindy had to pause it on that point, and then Rodney and Kelly.
Is the audio still buzzing?
Yes, it is. Please.
I'm so sorry. I
Yeah.
think
Go
it's
ahead
my
though. Go
laptop
ahead.
Go
fan.
ahead.
It's listenable.
It's
Go
yeah,
ahead.
it's palatable.
Okay. So my point kind of comes at it from a different perspective in terms of having business sense. What I think is every artist should have business sense so that businesses don't rob artists. And that is artistic businesses, that is corporate businesses. so that businesses do not rob artists, artists need to know what's going on. They need to understand what is expected or what is required of them as artists and as business people, because as we have rightly discussed, arts is a business, arts entrepreneurship is a business. So when we go to the corporate Barbados, as Nikita rightly said, and they won't give you chump change or cheese. I'm so sorry that happened to you, Kelly. I don't really understand what cheese is supposed to do. But when they won't give you chump change or cheese, and we understand that we are worth a certain kind of treatment, then the mindset starts to change from the inside out. That was my 2 cents.
Hey,
We're good. Another
go ahead,
thing,
Sluggy.
right, Randy?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
It's another thing is educating. I still think that we, the public, need educating because, all right, you can have a person in a particular art form. They don't have to be a great singer. They don't have to be a great performer. They just have to be art. You're a lyricist and people like you. You don't gotta got a good voice. You don't gotta be a good performer. But you can enter Piggity Crop and you got lyrics in the public like you. Blam, you win $100,000. A poet no, like, and this is not from corporate Barbados. This is from a government standpoint. A poet no like Cindy may never have the chance ever in life from government to win or opportunity to vie for $100,000 that could change her life.
Mm.
So it all goes down. It still goes down to what we see as art. Still remember, I'm right. Remember Beijing bus stop.
Mm.
Beijing bus stop for me was one of the most phenomenal things I saw as a child growing up,
Mm.
and it connect everything. And I used to remember the theme song. From the time the theme song come on, where the bus to town, like the bus, right? Don't remember that from there.
Right.
And then on
Again.
Beijing bus stop,
Again.
correct. And then on Beijing bus stop, Ronnie, you will see different paintings, drawings. Somebody had a met the set. I realized the set was painted a certain way. I
Correct.
realized that
It was all
when
inclusive.
I'm big up Auntie Merle. I big Auntie Merle. So I
Correct.
remember that after my bus stop, Rodney,
Auntie
and you
Marie.
know it, but the bus stop will go a certain color. They got a certain color and a certain
Yeah,
conversation, and these colors
yeah.
around the conversation. So you will know well if it is fire today, the set look bright. If it's somebody dead or somebody get laid down, the
It
color
dark.
look
Yeah.
sad and somber. So straight away you can see that visual art connecting with theater art. Like both connecting. They remember these theme songs will catch you. So something like Beijing Bus Stop encompasses every single thing in the art form. And I was saying like that was not a competition. That's something that worth $1 million,
$1 million.
Randy.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I was saying if like I was saying like that's something me as a cultural practitioner or someone in authority, I will put everything in that because especially in 2020, that is
Mm.
going to export Barbados on a serious level. And then for historical cultural evidence. And remember, and that came in my mind and I wrote it down when I heard Ronnie speak and he was speaking about paintings and drawings. Um it's something he said was really important. He was talking about painting and drawings and then like the house might have been moved. You
Oh, you
remember
mean
that
the
Ronnie said the house
tangible and
right, the house
intangible
might have
Tangible
been
and
heritage,
intangible
the
heritage. Yeah.
role,
Yeah.
yeah, that would play in
And
terms of you rendering something now, here and the now, but
preserving the
what if you
visual
don't see the
community.
future?
Yeah.
The things are removed through construction or destruction. That's the only image you have in terms of paying reference to a
Similar to the
historical event or
similar
moment.
to the buildings in
Yeah.
town that were removed. Do we have paintings of those or visual representations of those?
Pardon, in
The
buildings, you
buildings that were
mean
removed
in
in
terms
town.
of,
Do we have visual representations of those?
it's hard personally for me to say, but as or if they're not actual paintings, you may have photographs,
Photographs.
maybe,
Yeah.
for
Mm.
sure. But research would
which is
would
which,
would would
which is
solve
still
that,
an art, which is
and
an art still.
documentation, and photography is
It's still an art. Yeah.
an art form. But
Yeah.
I was just making the basic general point that it is important to do these things, and even in terms of architectural harmony. For example, if you compare, design is in everything, art is in everything, but good design, tasteful design, along with talking about the monetary and the fund assessing elements at the end of the day too. um, as practitioners in your own area at the top of your game, more or less, you would know that obviously the consistency in terms of encouraging excellence to sell your art form must also be tangential with that. And like for example, the case there now where Port Ferdinand is, that used to be an old fort there by 6 Mins, and they would have had a painting with that, not knowing years ago that we would have a lift bridge in the north. And I was like, my, look, I can't believe this driving into this. Yeah, so I never knew. You never know, but it just shows that in your society you must embed and inculcate in the generations that you must, even in our African tradition, pass on, not necessarily by writing, but through memories, like how we play Wari and how we play those other things through our iconographies and our art and music and sports and those things, and singing. Learn to tell our stories, our aesthetics through that that experience, more or less, to define who we are aesthetically and in terms of identity.
And we're gonna go to Kelly, and we're gonna also that actually leads us to the next point, which looks at how is art and culture viewed in schools. But we go to Kelly first, and then we come to that next point. Go ahead, Kel.
Thanks for that, Ronnie. Thanks for clearing that up for me, buddy.
Yes, you're welcome.
Okay, so Nikita spoke about her view of money changing, and Sydney spoke about dollars and cents in terms of your approach. I agree with you, both of you all actually. And I remember before I even got started in singing, I used to paint. I used to do, I used to draw and stuff like that. And I remember going to sell my first painting, and my father wasn't happy that I sold my first painting for $5. Now, the education, what we pass on to our children and our even our parents' view of money and value, etc. And a lot of it also has to do with race and that kind of stuff as well too. Our value of ourselves. I think personally, when I think I understood what my father was doing, it made me see money and the exchange of art for money as something wrong. Something was wrong with that, right? Therefore, growing up, my view of money was came from a different place. So you get older now, you realize you have something that you can offer. The element of value becomes a question, and you undervalue yourself. And a lot of artists go through that element of undervaluing themselves, right? So I do agree, if we educate ourselves about money and how it should be used, etc., will make a big difference, because you cannot go, if you go into certain, I just don't want to say certain, let me say certain places, and you price your work too low, right? They're not going to hire you. Can think like good. Let's say you price it at $4,000. Some places will say no, that's not good. You got probably price $10,000 or $15,000 for them to say, yeah, this is of value. So I think we have to relook what money means, how to look at it, what our value means, and also the element of remembering that where there's no vision, the people perish, and that art,
Let's see you, Cindy.
in terms of sale, doesn't have to be popular to make money. We are fed that if we have all of these people following us on Instagram and all that kind of stuff, it means that we're making money. They got people that got 47,000 people following them and they're making a cent, right? So the element of art, the element of the popularity in association with art is something that we have to look at. There are people who are living next door to us that are millionaires, but they might not be out, in the lavish stuff and driving the lavish cars and stuff like that. But they're making, what are we doing as artists as it relates to the money that we make? How are we investing, etc.? Those are the kind of conversations that I think that we need to have. How are we pulling our resources together, etc.? So I will come back to answer the last question you have when everybody else goes.
No problem. I'll let Cindy jump in here, Rodney.
Yeah, I agree. I respond very quickly after. Thanks, Cindy.
Go ahead, Cindy.
So the point of educating ourselves, and you made a very interesting point, Kelly, that I wanted to touch on, is when we undervalue ourselves and we go to places, sometimes people will look at you and look off. There's also an issue, like a pervasive issue, with the perceived overvaluing of artists, where I, as a spoken word poet, experience this quite a lot. And I know it probably happens in other genres, but I'm speaking from my experience. One day, Adrian Green told me, you should not leave your house to perform for less than X amount of money. No, I am a virtual, so to speak, unknown. Now come on the scene, fresh young face poet. If I come and charge X amount, and X amount is, let's call the amount $500. I think that's what he said, $500 for for one performance piece. That's about 5 minutes of your time, right? If I go to certain places and they ask me to perform, they're like, what am I paying you $500 for? You just stand up and talking. And the education is therefore twofold. Because as much as we are educating ourselves, we know the art business. We know what we do. We know what we offer. But a lot of the public, especially with poetry, again, speaking from my own experience, people don't know what you do. So I made a post sometime recently. I think it might have been earlier this year, it might have been late last year, but can't remember when. Where I said, on my performance invoices for companies, especially those who ask me what they're paying me for, I will have to detail an item and by item what it is I do. Oh, you asked me for a commission piece, therefore I have to go and research. I have to go and write. I have to put in time for editing. I have to have costuming. I have to make sure that I can get to and from the venue. You have to pay me for my time.
You have to
That's all the
rehearse.
things you pay me for.
You have to rehearse.
That education, I have to rehearse. And if it's rehearsal fees or venue fees that I contributing, more money. And because of that, it is so important that we as artists, and I know it's very, very tiring, because I have not been doing it long and I am quite tired. That sounds really self-entitled because I'm young. Because y'all have all been doing this way longer than I have. But we as artists often have to, or come from the disadvantage where we have to explain what it is we do by detail. You can't just say, I just paint. Well, it might be a little easier for a visual artist, because a visual artist, all right, they got the paint and no. See? Because people don't even know, people might not know the price of paint. People might not know the price of canvases, because canvases are rather expensive from what I have learned. People can see the that you have to pay musicians. Oh, lost, that instrument must cost enough money. Oh gosh, they got 6 band members in the backup. We got to pay each of them.
On the contrary.
But they're
on the contrary.
On
the contrary, you're lucky if people think that you should get $75 for all 7
so,
people
so
to share that $75.
For so much of it, people who do not understand what we do and the minutia that goes into what we do are like, why I gotta pay you that much money? For what? And that education is a serious thing. One more thing, I'm wrapping up. I'm wrapping up. So the other thing was, all right, I think I forget it now. I'm sorry.
It'll come back. It'll come back.
Yeah, it will come back.
The thing about having this, I'm not leaving home for less than X fee. Depending on what that fee is, depending on who you are, you might not left home. A lot of people that I have heard say, man, I left home for less than, and I don't see them perform nowhere. So it's it's a weird conundrum, It's like you want to live up to your value, but at the end of the day, you want to live still. So what do you do?
I remember the other point now.
Yeah.
Would you like me to make it quickly?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, by all means.
The other thing that we have a very serious problem with is we undercut each other a whole lot.
Oh yeah.
So a gig might be offering you $200. I just going with random amounts here. Gig might be $100. Best burn for you if they find for $125. And the education of art that across the board, singers charge between this much and this much for a 30-minute set. Across the board, poets charge this much, between this much and this much for a 15-minute set, etc., etc., etc. I don't know how it works necessarily with visual artists. Forgive me. I've never bought visual art, but it's knowing it comes with a knowledge or an agreement among the artistic communities of Barbados, whether you are a musician, poet, visual artist, photographer, whatever. We charge between this, and no matter what business, wherever comes to you and says, Cindy, I want performance, and you say, I want $500, and them say, well, we can't afford $500, so we ain't gonna take a poet. And you say, all right, and then go to the next poet, and the next poet say $500. Then you realize, well, geez, on bread, this poetry like it worth $500 because I can't get no poets for less.
If there's a standard.
We need to develop standards. That's one of the things that we need to do in the artistic community, is develop a standard rate of pay for each, because each thing is going to be priced differently. That I am aware of. Yeah. But we still need to understand the worth of each thing. Yes.
Yeah, walking towards that point, because we grappling all disciplines with something that is very layered, and even I would say is a conundrum, as my gentleman there saying, is a little complex in the sense that I heard you, and maybe that's what the actors in Hollywood, that's maybe where they formed guilds, and the performers, I think that is gone, but maybe that's why they had the need to perform various guilds to bring representation to themselves, or various I would say entities. And there are entities in Barbados with the Calypso tents, etc., to bring some degree of reasoning in terms of various structures, payment, and other ways. So maybe you could look at that. But also, you need to consider too also your duration in the market as well, because some people start out as young artists, starting out. What some senior artists do as well, they paint the really large pieces. You might go for thousands of dollars or what have you, depending on the length they were in the market. For example, the cost of materials, the time you put in, your skill level, things of that nature. But also they do something what Omawali affectionately called a food, or smaller pieces, or even invest in prints or cushions or magnets or cards, but they diversify the product. And that is looking at commodity in terms of the cultural theory concept of commodity in terms of exchange value, where one person produces a product in reference to exchange value for a monetary reward or some other type of reward. And that is where you're getting into commodifying or whatever those products. But beyond your own personal skills or talents in terms of selling and sharing them, yeah, certainly looking at how do research really, what you might go around for different galleries, private galleries, government galleries, may look online to see different prices in the world, because as Ms. Kadanga pointed out too, is something interesting that some people don't buy work for less than 15,000, 20,000. Some people just have a particular set price that if you go below that, they might think that art is not. So you're onto something interesting there too. And so that's why I'm saying it's layered, because there are some bases that some people just don't go below when they're purchasing artwork. And there are some people that are more fortunate than us in this part of the world. There's one lady in particular, I don't remember her name, but she, and the reality is those people set the price of art and the direction they take in terms of visual art, because they're billionaires, and there are people who advise billionaires in terms of how to collectors, how to collect and invest in a collection. Because the good thing about art is, once it's good quality art, the art is consistent, it accrues over time. So where you might find maybe a country might economically collapse, some people tend to take the collections and move with those collections. Or in terms of over time, you will see a piece worth a Rembrandt, or another piece worth a Picasso, $1 million. There was a Japanese businessman, I think, on YouTube, in the top 10. He bought a piece for $4 million or billion dollars, $4 million. So there are people that are willing to spend and take art in a specific direction, which is part of that 1% or 5% in the world that everybody will not fit into. But I must say, good efforts to persons like Orsina Roses of the world, or Albertas, who are going out there, and other contemporary artists. I won't remember everyone, so forgive me if I don't. But those persons as examples, or stalwarts, Akim Aishi, or wood carvers, Ashanti, Omfra, Kenneth Blackman, and even the work of my colleague Onika Small. I didn't want to forget to mention her at all. We are contemporaries, but she does good work with the Artist Alliance and would have invited me to exhibit as well. So I think that there are people out there wonderful work in terms of diversifying what we have here in terms of opportunities for exhibition, opportunities to work together as a group of creative artists, visual artists, and to offer these things. But as I say, moving forward, you must recognize and as I say, keep going back to using your platforms, the length you are in the market, the cost of materials, also the market forces, because you're going to expect in times that are very hard that you might just need to do a little adjustment, not on the value of your work, but a little adjustment downward to if you want that piece to really move, that it might move, or do smaller pieces and reduce the size and cost of materials to ensure that you still get that piece and earn an income, or diversify in prints, diversify in Christmas cards, greeting cards. There's nothing wrong with doing that, and even walking on foot or going around like Natasha Rollock. She's another young lady that is very good with her prints. She would market her prints on Instagram, and she would do a variety of prints, high quality paintings, and she would, in terms of the genre of objective scenes of Barbados, etc., beautiful scenes, and you would see her there with the tourists on Instagram taking pictures, and also Amanda Truett and those persons, I think Alison Chapman Andrews and those persons on Facebook and on Instagram, who would do art tours to various art studios in Barbados. I don't remember the name of it, but they would move around and have visits to artists working in the studios to gain them exposure. So as I say, you must come up with things like that, and in your pricing, you do a variety of pieces and diversify your products. And prints normally tend to roll over and sell, like just how persons in the craft sector, you don't want to leave that out as well. Persons who would sell jewelry and stuff, you need to diversify. You might have inline, but you might also have a product line, like how the gentleman Jamal Eiffel would do glass beads for the ladies here and stuff. He would do smaller glass beads, or how Fabian would do glass blowing, that you could get things for your home. They might do them in various sizes or lampshades, so that you can get a general sense. Because the interesting thing about art, which is different, is that these are not mass-produced items. So people doing handmade, one-of-a-kind commodities obviously would fetch a higher price line than maybe mass-produced products that might be cheaper over the amount you produce. So you might need to just look at those elements, and guilds come together and research the market forces, move around and see how people are setting their prices, and talk with people who are in the game in the various disciplines, and determine how you would strategize your pricing points.
I know you mentioned pricing. I wanted to throw a question at Nikita. In terms of the scope for entertainment law and by extension creative law here in Barbados, based on what you've been practicing and your experiences thus far and the need for it. We know there's a need. However, persons may not be willing to facilitate through payment for your services, given that, the legal advice costs money, right? So people may be taking it into their own hands or whatever. But how do you see the scope for entertainment law and creative law and its development here in Barbados?
Well, the way I see it is that the same way how you would invest in your real property, you would invest in your home, you would invest in your furniture, you would invest in anything that you have that is tangible, you need to invest in your intellectual property as well. And I think that that's just the simplest way that we can put it. If you're purchasing a house, you have to pay the legal fees regardless. You just have to. Actually, when you're taking out a mortgage, not only will you have to pay your legal fees, but you also have to pay the mortgagee's legal fees. And guess what? You're going to do it because you want the exchange of what that is going to bring. So similarly, with your intellectual property, you need to invest in it if important enough to you. If it isn't, then, other things may take priority, and that's okay. We understand this. One person may be able to gather at the same time. That's okay for them. Another person may have to take a little longer. That person may take a year before they're able to do what it is to do, and that is okay too. But the bottom line is, if it's important to you and it's a priority, then you're going to make it work. regardless of how long it takes. And I think that that's just the simplest answer that I can give in response to that question.
What about the scope for the actual entertainment law and it being applied here? Do you see a lot of scenarios coming up where you see the potential or the need for more entertainment lawyers? I don't know if you're specifically an entertainment lawyer. I don't think you are, but I mean, based on situations, have you seen that as a need coming up?
I see it as a need simply because of the lack of understanding certain things and being able to give yourself the recognition of being able to be protected before something happens, right? So because of that, I see that there's a necessity for there to be the niche of being an entertainment lawyer in Barbados. I just think that more information needs to be given. So I have personally decided to assist artists by giving snippets of information to the general public. Now, as most people know, lawyers are not supposed to give unsolicited advice. So my videos are usually probably less than 2 minutes, just as general, like a general newsletter. But the newsletter is orally given, okay? So I wouldn't be able to dive into specific questions that I think people may have if they haven't asked for it. But what I can do is give general information. I've took the personal stance to be able to assist the creative industry by doing that, which would be on my Instagram page, Envy Music, or on my Facebook page, Envy Music. And I think that definitely entertainment law, just to summarize, is necessary in Barbados, and people need to view themselves as being worthy to have that protection. And in order to do that, the information that such a thing is out there needs to be accepted by the artists and in cultural practitioners.
Yeah, even personally, how we do business, we are trying to move to a more contract-based arrangement to ensure, as you said, your protection for you for what you have done or what you are doing. I don't know if the other creatives in here are willing to do that. I know our culture has caused our artists and our creators to move away from a contract. As soon as you pull out a paper, everybody's ready to run. It's like, oh no, you ain't signing a contract, So I would like you to weigh in on that. The other persons on the panel, Sluggy, Kelly, Sean, your perspective on contractual arrangements within the industry.
Okay, so
no matter who. Kelly, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's necessary, and as you said, it is a shift of mentality, especially sometimes, and it means that you need to have your contracts obviously ready, because like from myself, you may get called for gig today for tomorrow, right? You can't have to start to, you need to have something there ready for them to see, yeah, these are what the terms and conditions are. And I think it is a habit that we need to engage in. We talked a little bit about the export component of stuff. We didn't touch too much on it, but I remember going to Belize to do a trade mission. And after doing the trade mission, we followed up, and I was able to go back to teach voice there. And that was my first, experience. Like, you have to create a contract to export. Yeah, you're talking to these people good and everything, but everything is lined up there for them to understand these are the terms and conditions, And I think that the more practice we have of it, not like when we prepare, it's all about preparation, because when we prepare ourselves in that manner, I think that we are allowing ourselves to be able to start to engage bigger projects to come, right? Prepare ourselves from the perspective of the contract, so that if you get a call, it may be a last minute, because sometimes in this industry, we get a lot of last minute calls at times, right? You won't be able that you're getting shafted. And I agree with Nikita, and I thought it was very cool when you said, and true, invest in your work like it's, intellectual property. Same way. So is a practice that I think that we all need to engage in. And thanks, Nikita, for being, putting your work out there from the angles you have to put it because of the field that you're in. So I appreciate that very much.
All right, Nikita, you had something to say as well too.
I was just pretty much going to say the exact same thing that Kelly said, and you're welcome, Kelly. Just pretty much that it is a necessary thing that needs to happen within the creative industry. And you may think that our culture is one where contracts are shied away from, but quite to the contrary, it isn't. Otherwise, I won't have any work, right?
That's very true.
So we're in court, and most of the time it's based on a contractual arrangement that, you know, was breached or whatever the case is. And I think as artists, well, from this perspective, I have found that artists are going towards that side, because a few would have called me and asked me to assist them with certain things or retain my services towards a contract. So which, whenever I'm doing the consultation, I always express to them how pleased I am that they've taken this step, because it's something that is very, 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 very necessary. And even though you may have a contract that is oral, it is harder to prove, you know? So the evidence of having two people sign a written agreement is always best, especially when you go towards providing your services on a stage, whatever the case is. You may need certain things that orally someone would say, okay, yeah, cool, not a problem, yeah, man, I got you covered, and go along, and then you know what, you shafted at the end of the day because the person didn't remember, or the person just don't care, they just want you to agree to come and perform, and that's it, you lick up. Now, I've had situations where by artists entered into a contract, right? They've taken that position, they entered into a contract, they would have been shafted, or people attempted to shaft them, but then they came back and said, listen, this is what the situation is, this is what's going on, and then we had to deal with the case. And I was able to deal with the case because it would have been in the contract process, and it had everything there listed, and you know, it was better for you, so you didn't have to go through any long, arduous court process, because you decided to protect yourself from the very beginning in the event that something happened. Yeah.
Yep. Sluggy, you had a point on that as well.
Me.
No, I don't think, no, especially no, I don't think that contracts are something we are as afraid of as before. The beauty about being in some things from young, I did see it before, but no, most of us understand that a contract did is to help both, to protect both you and the other person.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how I view contract. I view a contract as if it's a contract between me and Randy. The contract there to protect both myself and Mr. Eastman. So I think that has changed, but contracts is the way to go, buddy.
Yeah,
Especially in 2020.
We got contracts for everything. We have contracts for everything. All right, so it's been 2 hours and 15 minutes, 45 minutes. Sorry, 2 hours and 45 minutes. Rodney, you had something else to pause it before we...
Yeah. Oh, my gentleman there, he was on before he stepped in. I think he was.
I didn't hear you. No.
No, I thought he was trying to something before he go ahead. No, yeah, just contracts is a very, to me, it protects both entities. It is necessary in this day and age. But in terms of art itself, visual art, I would just like to more than likely just wrap with the fact that the realities are, in Barbadian context and maybe the Caribbean context, and globally, these issues are also affecting persons. They may have larger demographics, maybe more funding, maybe a longer history in terms of the practice of the art form. But the reality is that we got to face the fact that we operated in a colonial, enslaved context, and we are now in a post-colonial context, and all those elements would bring to bear a certain amount of behaviors or resistance or maybe lack of certain infrastructures that would not allow us to maybe move towards certain positions as we as effectively would like to move towards. I keep saying, and I believe in a very positive and good way, that the entities will work together. You know, history from above and below will work together to ensure, if people keep pressing, that we have a national gallery that we can expose our collections in some future too, and that we also would get the necessary funding that we need, because you have artists who would, you won't say they want to be rebels or anything, but the truth is persons have to give pushback. Persons have to make statements as artists to let society know and feel that the art form should be taken serious, and that this is a serious profession and a serious job we do, and that it brings people livelihoods, just like artisans. And I'm sure that everyone administratively and otherwise are aware of this, but I think the general common challenge is always that is one of maybe lack of funding, maybe lack of some other will or something that we suffer from, or lack of attention from maybe the international domain. But I guess there are people working to ensure that we do get that attention, and have been doing that over a long period of time in terms of various discourses. And there are also artists that are making their personal statements. Like, for example, artist Nick Whittle, as in certain discourses written by Mr. Ray Saturday, art historian, would let you know that he, being a person that used to live in the UK, but he taught me by coming to Barbados and having to embrace a new culture, a new form, a new aesthetic, would, in his work, have certain and representations that would show that interaction with his routine and his settling in a new space, and how it would define or affect him otherwise. So you will see that manifested in the work. I can't show you specific pieces here because I don't have examples, unfortunately, if I would have. But then you have other persons like Akim or Aishi. You see Basquiat, you will see some of that influence in Akim's work, but he would have evolved. And in terms of Aishi, how he renders various peculiar aesthetics and iconography specific to the Barbadian experience and different to the international expectation is certainly evident in their work, along with Winston Kellman, who would reproduce and quietly, in a way, have some form of contestation in terms of how they constantly work in terms of expressionism, in terms of how they render the Barbadian landscape and render the Barbadian space by reproducing and recreating it over and over again, in terms of making a statement that art must be cemented into the psyche and taken seriously for persons here. And as well, emerging artists, people like Heidi Berger doing the art tours, people coming along from BCC. You don't want to discourage these people, but also set opportunities which is provided by places such as Fresh Milk and Annalie Davis, or some years ago, Miss Johnson Garner would have done soundscapes. They would have had private galleries on the island that would offer artists the opportunity, because artists make their statements through being exposed to galleries, the private ways, and galleries tend to represent artists. But also along with that, artists also have at their disposal, again, the use of social media. And if they themselves cannot market effectively, they perhaps have some type of friend or assistant or institution that can assist with marketing that. And as a way, don't keep it a secret, get yourselves out there. And I don't know if you could put an assessment on art, contemporary art. I don't think you should do it traditional art, or we would say people just paint fishing boats and chattel houses. I think all the art is relevant. All the art is relevant to represent Barbados. I had Miss Denise Maragoni. She used to represent art overseas with Barbadiana in Europe, and that did quite well in painting and things of that nature. Barbados had a footprint there. And then you also have persons where you were seeing the Arts Council, the tourists come and love to buy chattel houses, and the cruise ship tourists and tourists that would come in and support that type of art. So, and there's also people who see art as a hobby. So there are various layers: the conceptual, contemporary art, the what people would want to call the commercial art, or the chattel houses, and then people who would paint maybe quietly on a weekend, and they have have family and friends who would support that as well, or would offer to enter competition.